Hey guys, tonight we journey back to one of history's most brutal and unforgiving eras. We're diving deep into what a single day in medieval times would actually do to you. And trust me, it wouldn't be pretty. Forget the romanticized tales of chivalrous knights and fair maidens. The reality is that 24 hours in the Middle Ages would break you in ways you can't even imagine. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Because what we're about to explore isn't just history, it's a testament to human endurance in the face of unimaginable hardship. The rooster's crow pierces the pre-dawn darkness, but you're already awake. Not by choice. The cold has been gnawing at your bones for hours, seeping through the thin walls of your hovel like an unwelcome visitor that refuses to leave. Your bed, if you can call it that, is nothing more than a straw-stuffed sack that's gone flat from months of use. The straw pokes through the rough cloth, jabbing at your ribs and back with every movement. You're lying in what medieval peasants called a cot, essentially a wooden frame with rope stretched across it, topped with whatever padding you could scrounge together. The wealthy might have had feather mattresses, but you're lucky if your straw isn't moldy. And that smell wafting up from beneath you? That's not just old straw. That's the accumulated scent of months without proper washing, mixed with the earthen floor that doubles as your home's foundation. The walls around you are made of wattle and daub, a fancy term for sticks woven together and plastered with mud, straw, and yes, animal dung. The dung wasn't added for cruelty, it was actually a practical choice. It helped bind the mixture and provided insulation. But practical doesn't mean pleasant. Your home smells like a barn because, in many ways, it is one. There are no windows in your hovel. Glass is a luxury reserved for churches and the homes of the wealthy. Instead, you have small openings covered with oiled cloth or animal hide that does little to keep out the wind. The cold air whistles through gaps in the walls, and you can see your breath forming small clouds in the dim light filtering through the cracks. Your family is stirring around you. Medieval homes were typically one-room affairs where entire families lived, worked, and slept together. Privacy was a concept that simply didn't exist for the common folk. Your parents, siblings, and possibly grandparents are all within arm's reach, their bodies pressed together for warmth under whatever blankets and cloaks you could gather. The fire in the center of the room has died down to barely glowing embers. There's no chimney. Smoke simply rises and hopefully finds its way out through holes in the thatched roof. More often than not, it just hangs in the air, making your eyes water and your throat burn. But that smoke serves a purpose beyond warmth. It helps preserve the meat hanging from the rafters and keeps insects at bay. As you force yourself to sit up, every joint in your body protests. You're only in your 20s, but your body feels ancient. Years of hard labor, poor nutrition, and sleeping on surfaces that would make a modern prison seem luxurious have taken their toll. Your spine cracks like old wood, and your knees sound like grinding millstones. The floor beneath your feet is packed earth, cold and slightly damp from the night's condensation. In winter, it might be frozen solid. In summer, it could be crawling with insects. Today, it's just cold enough to make you wince as your bare feet touch the ground. Shoes are a luxury you can't afford. Most peasants went barefoot year-round, developing thick, calloused soles that could handle rough terrain but offered little protection against the cold. Your first task of the day is to coax life back into the dying fire. This isn't as simple as striking a match. Matches won't be invented for centuries. Instead, you carefully blow on the embers, adding dry kindling bit by bit. If the fire dies completely, you'll have to borrow coals from a neighbor or spend precious time creating fire from flint and steel. In winter, a dead fire could mean death for your family. The kindling catches and a small flame flickers to life. You feed it carefully with twigs and small branches, gradually building it up. The smoke makes you cough, but the warmth is worth it. Around you, your family begins to stir more actively. Your mother is already moving, her day starting even earlier than yours. Medieval women worked from before dawn until well after dark, managing households, caring for children, and often helping with field work. Your father groans as he sits up, his back protesting after a night on the hard surface. He's in his 40s, which makes him practically elderly by medieval standards. The average life expectancy was around 30-35 years, dragged down by high infant mortality and the constant threat of disease, accident, and malnutrition. Those who survived childhood might live into their 50s or 60s, but they aged hard and fast. The smell of the awakening household is overwhelming. Unwashed bodies, stale breath, the lingering odor of last night's meal, and the ever-present scent of smoke and damp earth create a cocktail that would make a modern person gag. But this is normal. This is life. Bathing is rare, maybe once a month if you're lucky, and only in warm weather. The rest of the time, you simply live with the accumulated grime and hope it doesn't attract too many fleas. Speaking of fleas, you feel them stirring as you move. They're your constant companions, living in your clothes, your bedding, and your hair. Everyone has them, from the lowliest peasant to the king himself. You scratch absently at a bite on your arm, knowing that the action will only make it worse but unable to resist the temporary relief. Your stomach growls, a hollow, aching sound that reminds you of yesterday's meager meal. Hunger is your constant companion, a gnawing presence that never fully goes away. Even in good times, peasants lived on the edge of starvation. A bad harvest, a harsh winter, or a lord's excessive demands could push an entire village into famine. The light filtering through the gaps in your walls is growing stronger, signaling that dawn is approaching. Soon, you'll need to venture outside into the cold morning air to begin the day's work. But first, you need to dress, a process that's both simpler and more complicated than you might expect. Your wardrobe consists of exactly one outfit. 1. You have a rough woolen tunic that reaches to your knees, a pair of brays, loose underwear made of linen if you're lucky, wool if you're not, and woolen hose that tie to your brays with leather thongs. Over this, you might have a cloak or mantle for warmth, but it's thin and worn, offering little protection against the elements. The wool is scratchy and uncomfortable, but it's what you have. It's been dyed with whatever materials were available, perhaps madder root for red, woad for blue, or left its natural brown or gray. The colors are muted and earthy, nothing like the vibrant hues you see in medieval manuscripts, which depicted the clothing of the wealthy. Your clothes haven't been washed in weeks. Water is precious, soap is expensive, and the time required for washing and drying clothes is time you can't spare from survival. Instead, you simply wear your clothes until they fall apart, then patch them or replace them if you can afford to. As you pull on your tunic, you notice new holes where moths have been feasting. The fabric is thin in places, worn through by constant use and rough treatment. Your hose have been darned so many times that they're more patch than original material, but they're what you have, and they'll have to do. The cold air hits your skin as you dress, making you shiver uncontrollably. There's no heating in your home beyond the central fire, and that barely warms a small circle around the hearth. The rest of the space is only marginally warmer than the outside air. Your breath forms clouds as you move about, and you can feel the cold seeping into your bones. Your family is going through the same morning ritual around you. Your younger siblings huddle together for warmth while your parents prepare for another day of back-breaking labor. There's no cheerful morning conversation, no leisurely breakfast preparation. Everyone moves with the grim efficiency of people who know that survival depends on making the most of every moment of daylight. The animals are stirring too. Yes, animals. Your family shares this space with a pig, some chickens, and possibly a goat or cow if you're fortunate enough to own one. They provide warmth, protection from theft, and are too valuable to risk leaving outside. The pig roots around in the straw and refuse on the floor, serving as a living garbage disposal. The chickens roost in the rafters, occasionally dropping their contributions to the floor below. This arrangement means that your home smells like a barnyard, but it also means that you have a source of protein from eggs and milk, and eventually meat when an animal is slaughtered. The animal's body heat also helps warm the space, though it comes at the cost of hygiene and air quality. As the fire grows stronger, you can see more clearly around the single room that serves as your entire world. The walls are blackened with soot from years of fires. The rafters are hung with whatever food you've managed to preserve, perhaps some dried meat, bundles of herbs, or strings of onions. These supplies represent the difference between life and death during the lean months of winter and early spring. Your possessions are few and precious. A wooden bowl, a spoon carved from horn or wood, perhaps a knife if you're lucky, a few clay pots for cooking and storage, some tools for your trade, a hoe, a sickle, maybe a hammer if you're a craftsman. Everything you own could fit in a single chest if you were wealthy enough to own a chest. The morning light is growing stronger now, and you know that soon you'll need to venture outside to begin the day's work. But first, there's the matter of breakfast, if you can call it that. Medieval peasants typically ate 2 meals a day, dinner around midday and supper in the evening. Breakfast was often just a piece of bread or some ale, if anything at all. Your mother is already preparing what passes for the morning meal. She takes a piece of bread from yesterday's baking, dark, coarse, and hard enough to break teeth if you're not careful. This isn't the fluffy white bread of modern times. Medieval peasant bread was made from whatever grains were available: barley, oats, rye, or a mixture of all three. In times of scarcity, it might be bulked out with peas, beans, or even ground acorns. The bread is accompanied by a cup of ale, weak, sour, and barely alcoholic, but safer to drink than water. Everyone drinks ale, from infants to the elderly, because the brewing process kills many of the harmful bacteria that make water dangerous. The ale tastes nothing like modern beer. It's flat, often cloudy, and flavored with whatever herbs were available instead of hops. As you chew the tough bread and sip the sour ale, you can feel the meager meal settling uneasily in your empty stomach. It's not enough. It's never enough. But it's what you have. The constant hunger is something you've learned to live with, a background ache that colors every moment of your existence. Your father is already discussing the day's work. The fields need tending, even in the depths of winter. There are tools to repair, animals to care for, and always the looming presence of your obligations to your lord. As a peasant, you don't own the land you work. You're bound to it, and to the lord who controls it, required to work his fields for a certain number of days each week and to give him a portion of everything you produce. The feudal system is a crushing weight that presses down on every aspect of your life. You can't leave without permission, can't marry without consent, can't even sell what little you produce without giving your lord his share first. You're not quite a slave, but you're not free either. You're somewhere in between, trapped in a system that offers little hope of improvement or escape. As the morning progresses, the reality of your situation becomes clearer. You're cold, hungry, dirty, and facing another day of grueling labor with little to show for it. Your body aches from the previous day's work and the uncomfortable night's sleep. Your clothes are inadequate protection against the elements. Your home offers little comfort or warmth. And this is just the beginning. You haven't even stepped outside yet, haven't faced the brutal realities of medieval weather, work, and social hierarchy. The day stretches ahead of you like a gauntlet of hardships, each one designed to test your endurance and will to survive. But you have no choice. Survival in medieval times isn't about comfort or happiness. It's about making it through another day, another season, another year. It's about enduring whatever hardships come your way and hoping that tomorrow might be slightly better than today. The fire crackles in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the soot-stained walls. Outside, you can hear the sounds of the village awakening, other families going through the same morning ritual, animals stirring, the distant sound of the church bell calling the faithful to morning prayers. Soon you'll have to leave the relative warmth and safety of your hovel and venture out into the medieval world. You'll face the cold, the mud, the backbreaking labor, and the constant threat of disease, accident, or violence. You'll work until your body screams for rest, eat food that barely sustains you, and return home exhausted to repeat the cycle again tomorrow. This is medieval life in all its harsh, unforgiving reality. No romance, no chivalry, no noble quests, just the daily struggle to survive in a world that seems designed to crush the human spirit, and you haven't even made it to sunrise yet. The church bell tolls across the village, its bronze voice cutting through the morning mist like a blade. This isn't a gentle wake-up call. It's a command. In medieval times, the church controlled not just your soul, but your schedule. The bell marks prime, the first of the canonical hours, and it means that whether you're ready or not, the day has officially begun. You force yourself to stand, every muscle in your body protesting the movement. The cold air hits you like a physical blow, and you can see your breath forming thick clouds in the dim light. Your joints are stiff from the cold and the hard sleeping surface, and it takes several minutes of careful movement before you feel remotely human. The first order of business is relieving yourself, and this is where medieval life shows its true colors. There's no bathroom in your hovel. That's a luxury reserved for castles and monasteries. Instead, you have a few options, none of them pleasant. If you're lucky, your family has a privy, a small wooden structure built over a pit behind your house. It's basically a hole in the ground with a wooden seat, offering minimal privacy and no protection from the elements. The smell is indescribable, a mixture of human waste, lime, if you can afford it, and whatever herbs you might scatter to mask the odor. More likely, you simply use a chamber pot, a ceramic or wooden bowl that sits in the corner of your room. This pot has been used by your entire family throughout the night, and by morning, it's full and reeking. The contents will need to be emptied, and guess where they go? Right into the street, often with a shouted warning of "Gardez-le," dash a corruption of the French "garde à l'eau," or watch out for the water. Yes, medieval streets were open sewers. Human waste, animal droppings, kitchen scraps, and industrial waste all flowed together in channels down the middle of the road. The smell was overwhelming, the health risks enormous, and the footing treacherous. Walking through a medieval town meant navigating rivers of filth while trying not to slip and fall into something unspeakable. If you're a woman, the situation is even more complicated. Privacy is non-existent, and the simple act of relieving yourself becomes an exercise in modesty and balance. Your long skirts make the process awkward, and there's always the risk of soiling your only set of clothes, a disaster that could take weeks to remedy. After dealing with your bodily needs, it's time to face another medieval reality: personal hygiene, or the lack thereof. Bathing is rare, expensive, and considered by many to be unhealthy. The prevailing medical theory holds that water opens the pores and allows disease to enter the body. Better to stay dirty and healthy than clean and sick. When bathing does occur, it's a major production. Water must be hauled from the well or river, heated over the fire in small batches, and poured into a wooden tub that leaks and splinters. The entire family uses the same water, starting with the father and working down through the hierarchy. By the time it's your turn, the water is cold, gray, and filled with the accumulated grime of everyone who went before you. Most of the time, you make do with a quick splash of cold water on your face and hands, if you're lucky enough to have water to spare. More often, you simply wipe yourself down with a damp cloth, or, in winter, make do with nothing at all. The result is that everyone, and I mean everyone, smells. It's not just body odor, though that's certainly part of it. It's the accumulated scent of unwashed clothes, unwashed bodies, smoke, animals, and the general filth of medieval life. Your hair is another matter entirely. It's unwashed, uncombed, and likely home to a thriving ecosystem of lice, fleas, and other parasites. Everyone has them, from the lowliest peasant to the king himself. You might run your fingers through your hair to dislodge the worst of the tangles, but a proper combing is a luxury you can't afford. Lice combs exist, but they're expensive and not particularly effective. The parasites aren't just annoying, they're dangerous. Lice can carry typhus, fleas can spread plague, and the constant scratching leads to open wounds that can become infected. But there's little you can do about it. Everyone itches, everyone scratches, and everyone accepts it as a normal part of life. Your teeth are another source of constant discomfort. There are no toothbrushes, no toothpaste, no dental care of any kind. Some people chew on twigs to clean their teeth, others rinse with wine or vinegar, but most simply ignore their oral hygiene entirely. The result is predictable. By your 20s, your teeth are already rotting, your gums are swollen and bleeding, and your breath could knock a horse unconscious. Dental pain is a constant companion. Toothaches throb day and night, making eating difficult and sleep nearly impossible. The only treatment is extraction, performed by a barber surgeon with crude iron tools and no anesthesia. Many people simply endure the pain until the tooth falls out on its own or an infection kills them. As you go through your morning routine, such as it is, the sounds of the village awakening grow louder around you. Dogs bark, pigs grunt, chickens cluck, and people call out to each other in the growing light. The air fills with the smoke from dozens of cooking fires, creating a haze that hangs over the settlement like a gray blanket. Your stomach growls again, reminding you that the small piece of bread and sour ale you had earlier is already a distant memory. But there's no time for a proper meal. Work calls, and in medieval times, work means survival. Your father is already moving about, gathering the tools he'll need for the day's labor. As a peasant, his life revolves around agriculture, and even in winter, there's always something that needs doing. Tools need repairing, animals need tending, and there's always the Lord's work to consider. The feudal system that governs your life is complex and oppressive. As a villain, a peasant bound to the land, you owe your lord a certain number of days of work each week. This might be 3 days out of 7, or it might be more during busy seasons like planting and harvest. The rest of your time is your own theoretically, but in practice you're so exhausted from the Lord's work that you can barely manage your own small plot. Your mother is preparing for her own day of labor. Medieval women worked just as hard as men, often harder. They managed the household, cared for children, tended gardens, preserved food, spun thread, wove cloth, brewed ale, and helped with field work when needed. There was no concept of leisure time for women. They worked from before dawn until well after dark, every day of their lives. Your younger siblings are stirring as well. Children in medieval times weren't coddled or protected the way modern children are. They were expected to contribute to the family's survival from an early age. A 5-year-old might tend geese or gather eggs. A 7-year-old could help with planting and weeding. By 10, they were doing adult work, just in smaller quantities. Education was non-existent for peasant children. Literacy was reserved for the clergy and the nobility. Less than 10% of the population could read or write. Knowledge was passed down orally, through stories, songs, and practical demonstration. You learned to farm by farming, to weave by weaving, to survive by surviving. The animals in your house are stirring too, adding their own contributions to the morning chaos. The pig roots through the straw on the floor, looking for scraps of food. The chickens flutter down from their roosts, clucking and scratching. If you're fortunate enough to have a cow or goat, it needs to be milked, a task that falls to whoever has the steadiest hands and the most patience. These animals are more than just livestock. They're your insurance policy against starvation. The pig will eventually be slaughtered and salted for winter meat. The chickens provide eggs and occasional meat. The cow or goat gives milk that can be drunk fresh or made into cheese. Losing any of these animals to disease, theft, or accident could mean the difference between life and death for your family. As the morning light grows stronger, you can see more clearly the conditions you're living in. The floor of your hovel is covered with a mixture of straw, animal droppings, food scraps, and general debris. This isn't neglect, it's normal. The straw serves as insulation and absorbs moisture, while the organic matter eventually decomposes and is replaced. It's a primitive form of flooring that works, after a fashion, but it's also a breeding ground for disease and parasites. The walls of your home are stained with soot from the central fire, and you can see daylight through gaps in the construction. The thatched roof sags in places and leaks when it rains. In winter, snow might blow through the gaps, and in summer, the heat is stifling. There's no insulation, no weatherproofing, no protection from the elements beyond the basic structure itself. Your possessions are pathetically few. Everything you own could fit in a single cart, if you were wealthy enough to own a cart. A few wooden bowls, some clay pots, a knife if you're lucky, maybe a spoon carved from horn. Your clothes, your bedding, your tools. It all adds up to less than what a modern person might take on a weekend camping trip. But these few possessions are precious beyond measure. That wooden bowl represents hours of skilled labor. The clay pot might have cost a day's wages. The knife could be the difference between eating and starving. Everything is repaired, reused, and treasured until it literally falls apart. The cold is becoming unbearable now. The fire in the center of the room provides some warmth, but it's localized and smoky. The rest of the space is barely warmer than the outside air. Your breath forms clouds, your fingers are numb, and you can feel the cold seeping into your bones. This is just the beginning of winter. It will get much worse before it gets better. Your father announces that it's time to begin the day's work. There's no discussion, no negotiation. In medieval times, survival trumps comfort every time. You pull your thin cloak around your shoulders, knowing it will provide little protection against the elements, and prepare to face the outside world. But first, you need to eat something more substantial than the bread and ale you had earlier. Your mother has prepared what passes for breakfast in your household, a bowl of pottage, the staple food of medieval peasants. Pottage is essentially a thick porridge made from whatever grains, vegetables, and scraps are available. Today's version contains some barley, a few withered turnips, and if you're very lucky, a small piece of salted pork for flavoring. It's been simmering over the fire since before dawn, slowly cooking into a gray, lumpy mass that looks about as appetizing as it sounds. You eat the pottage with a wooden spoon, trying not to think too hard about what might be in it. The barley is coarse and gritty, the turnips are mushy and flavorless, and the pork is so salty it makes your eyes water. But it's hot, it's filling, and it will give you the energy you need for the morning's work. The pottage is accompanied by more ale, the same weak sour brew you had earlier. Water is simply too dangerous to drink. Wells are contaminated with runoff from privies and animal pens. Rivers and streams are polluted with waste from upstream villages. The brewing process, even for weak ale, kills many of the harmful bacteria that make water deadly. As you eat, you can hear the sounds of the village coming to life around you. Doors creak open, animals are driven out to pasture, and people call out greetings to their neighbors. The church bell tolls again, marking another canonical hour and reminding everyone of their religious obligations. Religion permeates every aspect of medieval life. The church controls not just spiritual matters, but temporal ones as well. It owns vast amounts of land, collects taxes in the form of tithes, and has the power to excommunicate those who displease it. For a peasant, excommunication means social death. No one will trade with you, work with you, or even speak to you. The local priest is one of the most powerful people in your village, second only to the Lord himself. He can read and write, which gives him enormous influence. He performs the sacraments that mark the major events of life: baptism, marriage, last rites. He also serves as a judge in many disputes and has the authority to impose penances for sins both real and imagined. Your family, like all medieval families, is deeply religious, not by choice necessarily, but by necessity. The church teaches that suffering in this life will be rewarded in the next, and for people living in conditions like yours, that's often the only hope available. You pray regularly, attend Mass when you can, and try to live according to the Church's teachings, even when those teachings seem designed to make your already difficult life even harder. As you finish your meager breakfast, your father stands and announces that it's time to go. The sun is rising, casting long shadows across the village, and the day's work awaits. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, knowing that it will provide little protection against the cold wind that's already beginning to pick up. Your mother hands you a small bundle. Your midday meal, such as it is, a piece of bread, perhaps a bit of cheese if you're lucky, and a small clay jug of ale. This will have to sustain you through hours of back-breaking labor in the fields. You step outside into the medieval world, and the full reality of your situation hits you like a physical blow. The cold air cuts through your thin clothes like a knife. The ground beneath your feet is frozen solid, covered with a thin layer of frost that makes every step treacherous. The sky is gray and threatening, promising more cold weather to come. The village around you is a collection of hovels much like your own, scattered along muddy lanes that serve as streets. There are no sidewalks, no streetlights, no paved roads, just narrow tracks worn by the passage of feet, hooves, and cartwheels, now frozen into deep ruts that catch your feet and threaten to send you sprawling. The smell hits you next. A combination of human waste, animal droppings, rotting garbage, and smoke that hangs in the air like a physical presence. It's so strong it makes your eyes water and your stomach churn. But this is normal. This is what medieval villages smell like. You can see your neighbors emerging from their own hovels, bundled in whatever clothes they can manage, their faces already set in the grim expressions of people facing another day of hardship. There's no cheerful morning banter, no friendly waves. Everyone is focused on the simple task of survival. The animals are out too. Pigs rooting in the garbage, chickens scratching in the dirt, dogs fighting over scraps. They're all thin, all hungry, all competing for the same limited resources that you and your family depend on. As you make your way through the village toward the fields where you'll spend the day working, you pass the church, a stone building that towers over the wooden hovels around it. It's the largest, most impressive structure in the village, a constant reminder of the church's power and your own insignificance. The priest is already up and about, his well-fed figure a stark contrast to the gaunt faces of his parishioners. He nods to you as you pass, a gesture that's part blessing, part reminder of your obligations to both God and the church. You also pass the Lord's manor house, a fortified structure that dominates the village like a stone fist. It's where your Lord lives in relative comfort while you and your neighbors struggle to survive. The contrast is stark and intentional, a constant reminder of your place in the feudal hierarchy. Guards patrol the manor's walls, armed with swords and crossbows, ready to enforce the Lord's will with violence if necessary. They eye you suspiciously as you pass, as if your very existence is a potential threat to their master's authority. The fields stretch out before you, brown and barren in the winter light. This is where you'll spend the next several hours, working in conditions that would be considered inhumane by modern standards. The ground is frozen solid, making every task more difficult. The wind cuts through your clothes like a blade, and there's no shelter, no warmth, no respite from the elements. Your tools are crude and inadequate, a wooden-handled hoe with an iron blade if you're lucky. More likely, you'll be working with tools made entirely of wood, shaped by hand and worn smooth by years of use. They're heavy, awkward, and inefficient, but they're what you have. As you begin your work, the reality of medieval labor becomes clear. This isn't the romanticized vision of pastoral life that modern people sometimes imagine. This is backbreaking, soul-crushing work performed in brutal conditions for minimal reward. Your back aches within minutes, your hands are already numb from the cold, and you know that you have hours of this ahead of you. The sun climbs higher in the sky, but it provides little warmth. The wind picks up, driving the cold deeper into your bones. Your stomach is already empty again, the meager breakfast a distant memory. Your feet are numb in their inadequate coverings, and you can feel blisters forming where your rough clothes rub against your skin. This is medieval life in all its harsh reality. No romance, no adventure, no noble quests, just the daily grind of survival in a world that seems designed to crush the human spirit. And you're only 2 hours into your day. The morning routine is complete, but the real challenges are just beginning. The sun is up, the work has started, and you're already exhausted. You have 22 more hours to survive, and each one will bring new hardships, new challenges, and new reminders of just how brutal life in medieval times really was. The morning sun climbs higher, but its pale light offers no warmth, only the cruel promise of another day of backbreaking labor. You're standing in a field that stretches to the horizon, the soil frozen solid beneath your feet, holding a tool that feels more like an instrument of torture than a means of livelihood. Your hoe is a crude thing, a wooden handle worn smooth by countless hands, topped with an iron blade that's been sharpened so many times, it's barely wider than a knife. The handle is too long for your height, forcing you to bend at an awkward angle that will have your back screaming within the hour. But this tool, represents a significant investment for your family. Iron is expensive, and a hoe with a metal blade is a luxury that many peasants can't afford. The work ahead of you is mind-numbing in its repetition and brutality. Even in winter, there's always something that needs doing in the fields. Today, you're breaking up the frozen clods of earth left from the autumn plowing, preparing the soil for spring planting that's still months away. Each swing of the hoe sends shock waves up your arms and into your shoulders. The frozen earth resists every blow, sometimes sending the tool bouncing back with enough force to jar your teeth. Within minutes, your hands are cramping from gripping the wooden handle. You have no gloves. Leather is expensive, and wool mittens are a luxury you can't afford. Your bare hands quickly become numb from the cold, making it difficult to maintain your grip on the tool. Blisters form and burst, leaving raw, bleeding wounds that will take weeks to heal properly. Your back begins to ache almost immediately. The constant bending and straightening, combined with the jarring impact of the hoe against the frozen ground, puts enormous strain on your spine. Medieval peasants developed characteristic curved backs from years of this kind of labor, their bodies permanently bent from a lifetime of stooping over tools and crops. The cold is relentless. Your thin woolen clothes provide little protection against the wind that cuts across the open fields. Your feet, wrapped in cloth and stuffed into crude leather shoes, are already numb. The shoes themselves are little more than pieces of hide sewn together with sinew, offering minimal protection against the frozen ground. Water seeps through the gaps, and soon your feet are not just cold but wet, increasing the risk of frostbite. Your breath forms thick clouds in the frigid air, and you can feel ice crystals forming in your nostrils with each inhalation. The wind drives the cold deeper into your bones, and no amount of physical exertion seems to warm you. Your fingers are so numb that you can barely feel the handle of your hoe, and you have to look down to make sure you're still gripping it properly. But you can't stop. You can't rest. The overseer, one of the Lord's men, rides his horse along the edge of the field, watching the workers with cold, calculating eyes. He carries a whip, and he's not afraid to use it on anyone who appears to be slacking. You've seen men beaten bloody for taking too long to catch their breath or for pausing to warm their hands. The feudal system that governs your life is a machine designed to extract every ounce of labor from your body while giving you just enough to survive. Barely. As a villain, you're bound to this land and to the Lord who owns it. You can't leave without permission, can't marry without consent, can't even sell the meager produce from your own small plot without giving the Lord his share first. 3 days a week, you work the Lord's land for free. This is called corvée labor, and it's the price you pay for the privilege of working a small plot for yourself. During busy seasons like planting and harvest, this can increase to 5 or even 6 days a week. The remaining time is supposedly your own, but you're usually too exhausted to make much use of it. The work is not just physically demanding. It's dangerous. The tools are crude and poorly maintained. Accidents are common and often fatal. A slip of the hoe can slice open your leg. A fall while working on the Lord's buildings can break bones or worse. There's no medical care beyond what the village-wise woman can provide with her limited knowledge of herbs and folk remedies. Your fellow workers are scattered across the field, each bent over their own patch of frozen earth. There's little conversation. Everyone needs to conserve their energy for the work, and besides, talking might attract the overseer's attention. The only sounds are the rhythmic thudding of hoes against earth, the occasional grunt of effort, and the constant whistle of wind across the barren landscape. The man working next to you is your neighbor, Thomas. He's in his 30s, but he looks 50. His back is permanently bent from years of field work. His hands are gnarled and scarred, and he has a persistent cough that's been getting worse all winter. You know he won't live to see 40. Few peasants do. The combination of poor nutrition, brutal working conditions, and complete lack of medical care ensures that most people are worn out and dead by middle age. Thomas's wife died in childbirth last year, leaving him with 3 young children to care for. Without a woman to manage the household, cook, and help with the lighter work, his family is slowly starving. The children are thin and sickly, and you know that at least one of them probably won't survive the winter. This is normal. This is expected. Child mortality rates are so high that parents often don't even name their children until they're sure they'll survive their first year. As the morning wears on, your body begins to rebel against the punishment you're inflicting on it. Your back feels like it's on fire, each movement sending spikes of pain up your spine. Your shoulders ache from the constant swinging motion. Your hands are raw and bleeding, the wooden handle of the hoe slick with your blood. Your stomach is a hollow, gnawing void. The small breakfast you had hours ago is a distant memory, and your body is beginning to consume itself for energy. This is chronic malnutrition, not the dramatic starvation you might imagine, but the slow, grinding hunger that saps your strength and clouds your mind. You're always hungry, always tired, always operating at the edge of your physical capabilities. The sun climbs higher, but it provides no warmth. If anything, the wind seems to be getting stronger, driving the cold deeper into your bones. Your feet have lost all feeling, and you're starting to worry about frostbite. You've seen men lose toes, fingers, even entire hands to the cold, and you know that such an injury would mean death for someone in your position. Around mid-morning, one of the younger workers, a boy of perhaps 14, collapses. He's been working since before dawn, and his body simply can't take any more. The overseer rides over, dismounts, and kicks the boy in the ribs. When he doesn't get up immediately, the overseer raises his whip. "Get up, you lazy dog," he shouts. "The Lord's work doesn't wait for weaklings." The boy struggles to his feet, swaying with exhaustion and cold. Blood trickles from his nose where the overseer's boot connected. He picks up his hoe with shaking hands and returns to work, knowing that another collapse will mean a beating that could cripple or kill him. This is the reality of medieval labor. There are no safety regulations, no workers' rights, no concept of humane treatment. You are a tool, nothing more, and tools that break are simply replaced. The Lord has dozens of peasants bound to his land, and if one dies, there are always others to take their place. The work continues without pause. Your world narrows to the small patch of earth in front of you, the weight of the hoe in your hands, and the constant battle against cold, hunger, and exhaustion. Time seems to crawl by, each minute an eternity of suffering. Your mind begins to wander, a dangerous luxury in your situation. You think about your family, huddled around the meager fire in your hovel. You think about the meal you'll have at midday, if you can call a piece of stale bread and some thin gruel a meal. You think about the warm bed you'll never have, the full stomach you'll never know, the life of comfort and ease that exists only in your imagination. But mostly, you try not to think at all. Thinking leads to despair, and despair is a luxury you can't afford. You need every ounce of mental and physical strength just to survive each day. Hope is dangerous. It makes the present suffering seem even more unbearable. The other workers around you are going through the same struggle. You can see it in their faces, the grim determination, the barely suppressed desperation, the knowledge that this is their life, and it will never get better. Some of them have been doing this work for decades, and they'll continue until their bodies give out completely. There's an old man working at the far end of the field, Geoffrey, who must be at least 50, ancient by peasant standards. His movements are slow and painful, but he keeps working because he has no choice. He has no family to care for him, no savings to fall back on, no hope of retirement. He'll work until he drops dead in the field, and then he'll be buried in an unmarked grave in the village churchyard. The social hierarchy that governs your world is rigid and unforgiving. At the top is the king, appointed by God himself according to church doctrine. Below him are the great nobles, the dukes and earls who control vast territories. Below them are the lesser nobles, the knights and barons, who serve as the military backbone of the feudal system. And at the bottom, far below everyone else, are you and your fellow peasants. You exist to work, to produce food and goods for your betters, and to die quietly when you're no longer useful. You have no rights, no voice in government, no hope of advancement. You are born a peasant, you live as a peasant, and you die as a peasant. The church reinforces this system at every turn. The priests preach that your suffering in this life will be rewarded in the next, that God has ordained the social order, and that rebellion against your betters is rebellion against God himself. They tell you to be grateful for your lot, to accept your suffering with patience and humility, and to look forward to the paradise that awaits you after death. But paradise seems very far away when your back is breaking and your stomach is empty. The promise of heavenly reward does little to ease the pain of earthly suffering. Still, you cling to your faith because it's all you have. Without the hope of something better after death, life would be truly unbearable. As the morning progresses, the physical toll of the work becomes increasingly severe. Your hands are now more blood than skin, the wooden handle of your hoe slippery with gore. Every movement sends fresh waves of pain through your back and shoulders. Your legs are shaking with exhaustion, and you're not sure how much longer you can remain upright. The cold has penetrated so deeply into your body that you've stopped shivering, a dangerous sign that means your body is beginning to shut down non-essential functions to preserve core temperature. Your thinking is becoming sluggish, your movements clumsy. You know you're in the early stages of hypothermia, but there's nothing you can do about it. You can't stop working, can't seek shelter, can't even pause to warm your hands. Around you, your fellow workers are showing similar signs of distress. Several men are coughing up blood, a sign of lung damage from breathing the cold air and inhaling dust from the frozen earth. Others are limping from injuries sustained during the morning's work, but no one stops, no one complains, no one asks for help. They all know that showing weakness will only make their situation worse. The overseer continues his patrol, his horse's hooves crunching on the frozen ground. He's wrapped in a thick woolen cloak lined with fur, his hands protected by leather gloves, his feet warm in sturdy boots. The contrast between his comfort and your suffering is stark and intentional. It's a reminder of your place in the world, a visual representation of the vast gulf that separates the rulers from the ruled. Occasionally, he stops to berate a worker who isn't moving fast enough or whose work doesn't meet his standards. His voice carries across the field, harsh and commanding, filled with the casual cruelty of someone who has never known want or hardship. To him, you're not a human being with feelings and needs. You're a piece of equipment that needs to be driven hard to get maximum productivity. The sun reaches its zenith, casting short shadows on the frozen ground. You've been working for 5 hours now, and your body is beginning to shut down. Your vision is blurring, your hands are shaking uncontrollably, and you can barely lift the hoe anymore. But you know that the midday break is still an hour away, and you have to keep going. This is when accidents happen. Exhausted workers make mistakes, lose their footing, or simply collapse from the strain. You've seen men die in these fields, from heart attacks brought on by overexertion, from injuries that became infected, from simple exhaustion and exposure. Their bodies are dragged away and buried without ceremony, and new workers take their places the next day. The thought of death doesn't frighten you as much as it should. In some ways, it would be a relief, an end to the constant pain, hunger, and suffering that define your existence. But you have a family depending on you, and that knowledge keeps you moving even when your body screams for rest. Your wife is at home, caring for your children and trying to make something edible from the meager supplies you have. She's probably spinning thread or weaving cloth, work that's just as demanding as field labor but pays even less. Your children are hungry, cold, and dressed in rags, but they're alive, and that's more than many families can say. The responsibility weighs on you like a physical burden. Every swing of the hoe, every step through the frozen field, every moment of suffering is for them. You endure because they need you to endure. You survive because they need you to survive. It's the only thing that gives meaning to your existence. As the morning draws to a close, you can feel your strength ebbing away like water from a cracked pot. Your movements are becoming increasingly erratic, your breathing labored and painful. The cold has penetrated so deeply into your body that you can no longer feel your extremities. You're operating on pure willpower now, your body pushed far beyond its natural limits. The other workers around you are in similar condition. The field is filled with the sounds of suffering, labored breathing, suppressed groans of pain, the occasional sob of despair. But still, the work continues. Still, The hose rise and fall. Still, the frozen earth is broken and turned. This is medieval labor in all its brutal reality. No machines to ease the burden, no safety equipment to prevent injury, no medical care when things go wrong. Just human muscle and bone pitted against the unforgiving demands of survival. And you're only halfway through your working day. The sun continues its arc across the gray sky, marking the passage of time with cruel precision. Each minute feels like an hour, each hour like a day. Your world has shrunk to the small patch of earth in front of you, the weight of the tool in your hands, and the constant struggle to keep moving despite the pain. Soon the church bell will toll the hour of sext, marking midday and the brief respite that comes with the main meal. But even that small mercy seems impossibly far away as you continue your battle against the frozen earth, your failing body, and the crushing weight of a system designed to extract every ounce of value from your life while giving you just enough to survive another day. This is what medieval life really looked like. Not the romanticized vision of noble knights and fair maidens, but the harsh reality of human beings ground down by a system that valued them less than the animals they tended. And the day is far from over. The church bell tolls across the frozen fields, its bronze voice cutting through the wind like a blade of mercy. Sext, the 6th hour, and with it comes the promise of food and a brief respite from the morning's brutal labor. You straighten your back for the first time in hours, and the movement sends lightning bolts of pain shooting up your spine. Your vertebrae crack like breaking twigs, and you have to grip your hoe to keep from falling over. Around you, your fellow workers are going through the same agonizing process of unbending their tortured bodies. Some can't straighten up at all. Their backs have seized up from the cold and the constant bending, leaving them hunched over like human question marks. They'll work the rest of the day in that position, their spines locked in a curve of permanent suffering. The overseer calls out from his horse, his voice carrying easily across the field. 1 hour, he shouts. Anyone not back to work when the bell tolls will feel my whip. His threat hangs in the air like a physical presence, a reminder that even this small mercy comes with conditions. You lean your hoe against a fence post and begin the slow, painful walk back toward the village. Your legs are shaking with exhaustion, and each step sends fresh waves of agony through your frozen feet. The crude leather shoes you wear have provided no protection against the cold, and you suspect you may have frostbite in several toes. You can't feel them anymore, which is either a blessing or a very bad sign. Your hands are in even worse condition. The wooden handle of the hoe has worn away the skin on your palms, leaving raw, bleeding wounds that will take weeks to heal. Your fingers are so numb you can barely move them, and when you try to flex them, the pain is excruciating. Blood has frozen on your knuckles, creating a grotesque pattern of red ice crystals. The walk back to the village is a journey through a landscape of misery. The other workers stumble along beside you, their faces gray with exhaustion and cold. No one speaks. Everyone is conserving their energy for the afternoon's work that lies ahead. The only sounds are the crunch of frozen earth underfoot and the labored breathing of people pushed to their physical limits. Thomas, your neighbor, is limping badly. You can see that his left leg is dragging, and there's a dark stain spreading down his trouser leg that looks suspiciously like blood. He must have injured himself during the morning's work, but he hasn't said anything about it. Complaining about injuries is a luxury that peasants can't afford. It marks you as weak, unreliable, a burden on the community. The village comes into view, a collection of hovels that looks even more depressing in the harsh light of midday. Smoke rises from cooking fires, creating a gray haze that hangs over the settlement like a shroud. The smell hits you before you reach the first houses, a mixture of human waste, animal droppings, rotting garbage, and the ever-present scent of unwashed bodies. Your own hovel looks particularly pathetic in the daylight. The walls are stained with soot and grime, the thatched roof sags in several places, and you can see daylight through gaps in the construction. It's not much, but it's home, and right now it represents warmth and food and a few precious minutes of rest. You push open the wooden door. It's not really a door, more like a collection of planks held together with rope and leather hinges. and step into the dim interior. The contrast with the bright daylight outside leaves you temporarily blind, and you have to feel your way forward until your eyes adjust. The interior of your hovel is barely warmer than the outside air. The fire in the center of the room has died down to glowing embers, and your breath still forms clouds in the frigid air. Your wife, Margaret, is hunched over the hearth, stirring something in a clay pot with a wooden spoon. She looks up as you enter, and you can see the worry in her eyes as she takes in your condition. "You look half dead," she says quietly, her voice hoarse from breathing smoke all morning. "Sit by the fire and warm yourself." You collapse onto a three-legged stool near the hearth, your legs finally giving out after hours of supporting your weight on the frozen ground. The warmth from the embers feels like heaven against your frozen skin, but it also brings pain as circulation slowly returns to your extremities. Your hands and feet begin to throb with a deep, aching pain that makes you grit your teeth. Margaret ladles some of the contents of the pot into a wooden bowl and hands it to you. It's pottage again, the same gray, lumpy mixture you've eaten for breakfast, dinner, and supper for as long as you can remember. Today's version contains some barley, a few withered turnips, and what might be a small piece of salted pork, though it's so small and overcooked that it's hard to tell. The pottage is lukewarm at best. Fuel for the fire is too precious to waste on keeping food hot. You eat it with a wooden spoon, trying not to think about what might be swimming in the murky liquid. The barley is undercooked and gritty, the turnips are mushy and flavorless, and the supposed pork tastes more like salt than meat. But it's food, and your body desperately needs the calories. Your children are huddled in the corner of the room, sharing a single bowl of pottage between them. Little Mary, your youngest at 5 years old, is coughing, a deep, wet sound that you recognize as the beginning of lung fever. In a few days, she'll either recover or die. There's nothing you can do about it either way. Medicine is for the rich, and even then, it's more likely to kill than cure. Your son John, 8 years old, is already showing the signs of malnutrition that mark all peasant children. His arms and legs are stick-thin, his belly is distended from eating too much rough grain, and his hair has the reddish tinge that comes from a diet lacking in proper nutrients. He should be playing, learning, growing strong. Instead, he's slowly starving in plain sight. Your oldest child, Agnes, is 12 and already working like an adult. She spent the morning spinning thread from the small amount of wool your family managed to acquire, work that requires steady hands and good eyesight. The thread she produces will be woven into cloth that can be sold or traded for other necessities. Every member of the family, no matter how young, must contribute to survival. Margaret herself looks exhausted. She's been up since before dawn, tending the fire, preparing food, caring for the children, and doing the dozens of small tasks that keep a medieval household functioning. Her hands are raw from handling rough wool and cold water, her back aches from bending over the hearth, and her face is prematurely aged from years of worry and hardship. "How was the morning?" she asks, though she can probably guess from looking at you. "Hard," you reply, which is all that needs to be said. Every day is hard. Every morning brings the same brutal labor, the same struggle against cold and hunger and exhaustion. There's no point in elaborating. You eat your pottage in silence, savoring each spoonful despite its unappetizing appearance. Your stomach, shrunken from chronic hunger, feels full after just a few bites, but you force yourself to finish the entire bowl. You need every calorie you can get for the afternoon's work. The bread that accompanies the meal is a small, dark loaf that's hard enough to break teeth. It's made from a mixture of barley, oats, and rye, with some peas and beans ground in to bulk it out. In lean times, it might also contain ground acorns, bark, or even sawdust. The bread is dense, coarse, and difficult to digest, but it provides essential carbohydrates that your body craves. You tear off a piece and dip it in the remaining pottage to soften it enough to chew. The bread tastes of nothing much, just the vague flavor of grain and the slight bitterness of whatever adulterants have been added. But it's filling, and that's what matters. The ale that accompanies the meal is the same weak, sour brew you've been drinking all day. It's made from barley that's been malted, mashed, and fermented with whatever wild yeasts happen to be in the air. The result is a cloudy, flat liquid that tastes vaguely of grain and disappointment. But it's safer than water, and it provides a small amount of nutrition along with the alcohol. As you eat, you become aware of the sounds around you. Your children are coughing. All of them have the persistent hack that comes from breathing smoke and cold air. Margaret is moving about the small space, cleaning up from the morning's work and preparing for the afternoon's tasks. Outside, you can hear the sounds of the village: dogs barking, pigs grunting, people calling to each other. The animals that share your living space are stirring as well. The pig is rooting around in the straw on the floor, looking for scraps of food. The chickens are clucking softly, and you can hear them scratching in the rafters above your head. If you're very lucky, one of them might lay an egg today, a precious source of protein that could make the difference between health and sickness for one of your children. The warmth from the fire is beginning to penetrate your frozen clothing, and with it comes the smell. You haven't bathed in months, your clothes haven't been washed in weeks, and you've been working in a field that's been fertilized with human and animal waste. The combination is overwhelming, but it's normal. Everyone smells like this. It's just part of life. Your hands are beginning to thaw out, and the pain is excruciating. As circulation returns to your fingers, they throb with a deep, burning ache that makes you want to cry out. You flex them carefully, trying to work some feeling back into them, but the movement sends fresh waves of agony through your damaged palms. Margaret notices your distress and brings you a small clay pot filled with a mixture of animal fat and herbs. "For your hands," she says simply. "The salve is a luxury. Fat is precious and herbs are expensive." But she knows you need to be able to grip your tools for the afternoon's work. You rub the greasy mixture into your palms, wincing as it stings the open wounds. The fat will provide some protection against the rough wooden handle of your hoe, and the herbs might help prevent infection. It's not much, but it's all the medical care you're likely to receive. As you tend to your hands, you notice that Thomas has arrived at his own hovel next door. Through the thin walls, you can hear his children crying, a thin, desperate sound that speaks of hunger and cold and fear. His wife died in childbirth last year, and he's been struggling to care for 3 young children on his own. Without a woman to manage the household, his family is slowly falling apart. The sound of crying children is common in the village. Infant mortality is so high that most families lose at least one child before their 5th birthday. Disease, malnutrition, accidents, and simple exposure to the elements claim young lives with ruthless efficiency. Parents learn not to become too attached to their children until they're sure they'll survive to adulthood. Your own children have been lucky so far. Mary's cough is worrying, but she's survived worse. John is thin but strong for his age. Agnes is old enough to be useful, which means she's valuable to the family's survival. But you know that luck can change quickly in medieval times. A bad harvest, a harsh winter, or a simple accident could destroy your family in a matter of days. The church bell tolls again, marking the passage of time. You've been resting for perhaps 20 minutes, but already you can feel your muscles stiffening up from the cold and the brief inactivity. Your back is seizing up again, and you know that getting back to work is going to be agony. Margaret hands you a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Your afternoon meal. It contains a piece of bread, a small chunk of cheese if you're lucky, and perhaps an onion or a few dried peas. This will have to sustain you through the remaining hours of daylight work. You tuck the bundle inside your tunic, close to your body, where it might stay slightly warm. "Be careful," Margaret says, as you prepare to leave. It's what she says every day, and every day you wonder if it will be the last time you hear her voice. Medieval life is unpredictable and dangerous. Men die in the fields from accidents, exposure, or simple exhaustion. Women die in childbirth or from the dozens of diseases that flourish in unsanitary conditions. Children die from causes that modern medicine could cure with a simple pill. You stand up slowly, your joints protesting every movement. The brief rest has actually made you feel worse in some ways. Your body has had time to register the full extent of the morning's damage, and now every muscle and joint is screaming in protest. But you have no choice. The overseer's threat hangs over you like a sword, and you know he'll make good on his promise to use the whip on anyone who's late returning to work. You kiss Margaret goodbye, a brief, perfunctory gesture that's more habit than affection. There's no time for romance in medieval peasant life, no energy for tender emotions. Love is a luxury that you can't afford when survival takes every ounce of strength you possess. The children barely look up as you prepare to leave. They're used to their father disappearing for long hours, returning exhausted and often injured. This is normal for them. They don't know any other way of life, and they probably never will. They'll grow up to be peasants like you, bound to the land, trapped in the same cycle of poverty and suffering that has defined your existence. You pull your thin cloak around your shoulders and step back out into the cold. The wind hits you like a physical blow, cutting through your inadequate clothing and driving the chill deep into your bones. The brief warmth you gained from the fire is already dissipating, and you know that within minutes you'll be as cold as you were before. The walk back to the fields is even more difficult than the walk to the village. Your body has stiffened up during the brief rest, and every step is an exercise in pain management. Your injured hands throb with each movement. Your back feels like it's held together with rusty wire, and your feet are completely numb inside your inadequate shoes. Other workers are making the same journey, their faces set in expressions of grim determination. No one speaks. There's nothing to say that hasn't been said 1,000 times before. Everyone knows what lies ahead. More hours of back-breaking labor in brutal conditions, more pain, more cold, more hunger. The overseer is already waiting in the field, mounted on his horse, whip in hand. He watches as the workers return, counting heads to make sure no one is missing. His face is hard and unsympathetic. He's been chosen for this job precisely because he lacks compassion for the people under his authority. "Back to work," he shouts as the last stragglers arrive. "The Lord's fields won't tend themselves." You pick up your hoe from where you left it leaning against the fence post. The wooden handle feels like ice against your damaged palms, and you have to grip it carefully to avoid tearing open the wounds that have barely begun to scab over. The tool feels heavier than it did this morning, as if the brief rest has somehow sapped your strength rather than restored it. The afternoon stretches ahead of you like a prison sentence. More hours of the same brutal labor, more pain, more cold, more exhaustion. Your body is already operating at the limits of its endurance, and you're not sure how much more punishment it can take. But you have no choice. You raise the hoe above your head and bring it down against the frozen earth with all the strength you can muster. The impact sends shockwaves up your arms and into your shoulders, and you grit your teeth against the pain. This is medieval life in all its harsh reality, a brief respite for a meager meal, then back to the grinding labor that defines your existence. No comfort, no luxury, no hope of anything better. Just the daily struggle to survive in a world that seems designed to crush the human spirit. The midday break is over. The real test of endurance is about to begin. The afternoon sun hangs low in the gray sky, offering no warmth, only the cruel reminder that you still have 5 more hours of daylight labor ahead of you. Your brief respite is over, and your body feels worse than it did this morning. The meager meal has done little to restore your strength, and the short rest has allowed your muscles to stiffen and your injuries to make themselves known with renewed intensity. You grip your hoe with hands that are more wound than skin, the rough wooden handle immediately reopening the cuts that had barely begun to scab over during your break. The animal fat salve Margaret applied provides minimal protection, and within minutes fresh blood is seeping through the crude bandages she wrapped around your palms. The frozen earth seems even more resistant now, as if it's absorbed some malevolent energy from the morning's assault. Each blow of your hoe sends jarring shocks up your arms, through your shoulders, and into your already damaged spine. Your back, which had seized up during the brief rest, screams in protest with every movement. The cold has penetrated so deeply into your body that you've stopped shivering, a dangerous sign that your body is beginning to shut down non-essential functions to preserve core temperature. Your feet are completely numb now, and you suspect that several toes may already be frostbitten. The crude leather shoes you wear have provided no protection against the elements, and ice crystals have formed inside them from your own sweat and the moisture that has seeped through the gaps. Around you, your fellow workers are showing similar signs of distress. The man to your left, Peter, a farmer in his 20s who looks 40, is coughing up blood. The combination of cold air, physical exertion, and the dust from the frozen earth has damaged his lungs, and each cough sends bright red droplets onto the gray soil. He'll be dead within a year, you know, but he keeps working because he has no choice. To your right, an older woman named Edith is struggling to lift her hoe. She's probably in her 30s, though she looks ancient by modern standards. Her back is so bent from years of field work that she can barely straighten up, and her movements are slow and painful. She has 6 children at home, and her husband died last winter from a fever. She's the sole support for her family, and if she can't work, they'll all starve. The overseer continues his patrol on horseback, his whip coiled and ready. He's noticed Peter's coughing and rides over to investigate. "You there?" he shouts. "Are you sick?" Peter straightens up as much as he can, wiping the blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. "No, sir," he lies. "Just a bit of dust in my throat." The overseer stares at him for a long moment, then nods curtly. See that it stays that way. Sick workers are useless workers, and useless workers don't eat. It's a death sentence disguised as motivation. Peter knows it, you know it, everyone in the field knows it, but there's nothing anyone can do. The feudal system that governs your lives has no place for compassion or mercy. You work until you drop, and when you can't work anymore, you die. The afternoon work is different from the morning's labor, but no less brutal. Instead of breaking up frozen clods, you're now clearing drainage ditches, backbreaking work that involves digging trenches in the frozen ground to channel water away from the fields. The ditches need to be precise. Too shallow and they won't drain properly. Too deep and they'll damage the soil structure. You're working with a spade now, a crude iron tool with a wooden handle that's been worn smooth by countless hands. The blade is dull and chipped, making every cut into the earth a struggle. The frozen ground resists your efforts, sometimes sending the spade bouncing back with enough force to jar your teeth. The work requires you to bend over constantly, putting enormous strain on your already damaged back. Each shovelful of earth must be lifted and thrown to the side, a motion that sends lightning bolts of pain through your spine. Your vertebrae feel like they're grinding against each other, and you can hear them creaking with each movement. Your hands are in agony. The wooden handle of the spade is rougher than the hoe, and it quickly wears away what little skin remains on your palms. Blood flows freely now, making the handle slippery and difficult to grip. You have to stop frequently to wipe the blood away, but each pause risks attracting the overseer's attention and his whip. The ditch you're digging is only supposed to be 2 feet deep, but in the frozen ground it might as well be 20. Each inch requires dozens of blows with the spade, and the earth comes up in tiny, grudging chunks. Your progress is measured in fractions, a few inches per hour if you're lucky. The physical demands of the work are crushing, but the mental toll is almost worse. The repetitive nature of the labor, dig, lift, throw, dig, lift, throw, creates a hypnotic rhythm that numbs the mind while destroying the body. Time seems to crawl by with agonizing slowness. Each glance at the sun shows that it has barely moved since the last time you looked. Your world has shrunk to the small section of ditch in front of you. Nothing exists beyond the next shovelful of earth, the next stab of pain in your back, the next drop of blood from your hands. This is what medieval labor does to the human spirit. It reduces you to a machine, a tool for converting human suffering into agricultural productivity. The cold continues to be your constant enemy. The wind has picked up, driving across the open fields with renewed fury. It cuts through your thin woolen clothes like they're made of paper, and you can feel it stealing what little body heat you have left. Your breath forms thick clouds that freeze almost instantly, creating ice crystals on your beard and around your nostrils. Your feet have become blocks of ice inside your inadequate shoes. You can't feel your toes at all now, and when you try to wiggle them, nothing happens. This is frostbite, you know, the slow death of tissue from cold. You've seen men lose toes, feet, even entire legs to the winter cold. But there's nothing you can do about it. You can't stop working to warm your feet, can't seek shelter, can't even stamp them to restore circulation without risking the overseer's wrath. Around mid-afternoon, Disaster strikes. Thomas, your neighbor who was limping this morning, suddenly cries out and falls to his knees. The injury to his leg has worsened throughout the day, and now he can no longer support his weight. Blood is flowing freely from a gash in his thigh, staining the frozen ground beneath him. The overseer rides over immediately, his face dark with anger. "Get up," he shouts. "The Lord's work doesn't wait for malingerers." Thomas tries to stand, but his injured leg won't support him. He falls again, this time face first into the frozen earth. The overseer dismounts and kicks him in the ribs, hard enough to crack bones. "I said get up," he roars, raising his whip. "Please, sir," Thomas gasps, blood trickling from his mouth. "I'm hurt. I need help." The overseer's response is swift and brutal. The whip comes down across Thomas's back with a sound like breaking wood. Thomas screams, a sound of pure agony that cuts across the field like a blade. The whip rises and falls again, tearing through his thin woolen tunic and opening long gashes in his flesh. You want to help? Want to intervene? But you know that doing so would only make things worse for both of you. The feudal system doesn't tolerate insubordination, and helping a fellow worker who's being punished would be seen as rebellion against authority. You keep working, your eyes fixed on the ground, trying to block out the sounds of Thomas's suffering. After what feels like an eternity, the beating stops. Thomas lies motionless on the frozen ground, blood pooling beneath him. The overseer remounts his horse and addresses the other workers. "Let this be a lesson to all of you," he says coldly. "The Lord expects his workers to be strong and reliable. Those who can't meet his expectations will be replaced." 2 of the younger workers are ordered to drag Thomas to the edge of the field and leave him there. Whether he lives or dies is no longer the overseer's concern. He's been written off as a loss, a broken tool to be discarded. His 3 young children will now be orphans, left to survive on their own or die trying. The incident casts a pall over the remaining workers. Everyone knows that they could be next, that a single moment of weakness or bad luck could result in the same fate. The fear is palpable, adding another layer of stress to an already unbearable situation. You redouble your efforts, ignoring the pain in your hands and back, pushing your body beyond its limits in a desperate attempt to avoid Thomas's fate. The spade feels like it weighs 100 pounds, and each shovelful of earth requires a monumental effort of will. But you keep going, driven by the knowledge that stopping means death. The sun continues its slow arc across the sky, marking the passage of time with cruel precision. 3 o'clock becomes 4, 4 becomes 5, and still the work continues. Your ditch is perhaps a foot deep now, far short of the required depth, but it represents hours of backbreaking labor and immeasurable suffering. Your body is beginning to shut down. Your vision is blurring. Your hands are shaking uncontrollably, and you're having trouble maintaining your balance. The loss of blood from your wounded palms, combined with the cold and exhaustion, is pushing you toward collapse. But you can't stop. Thomas's broken body at the edge of the field is a constant reminder of what happens to workers who can't keep up. The other workers around you are in similar condition. Several have collapsed and been dragged away like Thomas. Others are working despite obvious injuries, broken bones, deep cuts, signs of internal bleeding. The field has become a scene from hell, populated by the walking wounded who continue their labor because the alternative is death. The social hierarchy that governs this nightmare is rigid and unforgiving. At the top is the Lord, warm and comfortable in his manor house, counting the profits from your suffering. Below him is the overseer, well-fed and warmly dressed, enforcing the Lord's will with violence and intimidation. And at the bottom are you and your fellow peasants, ground down by a system that values you less than the animals you tend. The church, which should provide comfort and hope, instead reinforces this brutal system. The priests preach that your suffering is God's will, that your poverty is a test of faith, that your only hope lies in the afterlife. They tell you to be grateful for your lot, to accept your pain with humility, and to never question the divine order that keeps you in chains. But divine order feels like a cruel joke when your back is breaking and your hands are bleeding. The promise of heavenly reward seems hollow when you're watching your neighbor die from a beating for the crime of being injured. Still, you cling to your faith because it's all you have. Without the hope of something better after death, existence would be truly meaningless. As the afternoon wears on, the physical toll becomes increasingly severe. Your spade feels like it's made of lead, and you can barely lift it anymore. Your movements have become slow and clumsy, and you're making mistakes that could attract the overseer's attention. The ditch you're digging is crooked and uneven, far from the straight, precise channel that's required. Your breathing has become labored and painful. The cold air burns your lungs with each inhalation, and you can taste blood in your mouth. Your heart is racing from the exertion, but it feels weak and irregular, as if it might stop at any moment. You're experiencing the early stages of heart failure, brought on by the combination of extreme physical stress, cold exposure, and malnutrition. The mental effects are just as severe. The repetitive nature of the work, combined with the pain and exhaustion, has put you into a kind of trance. You're no longer fully conscious of your actions. Your body continues to work while your mind retreats into a protective fog. This dissociation is a survival mechanism, a way of enduring unbearable suffering by disconnecting from the experience. Around you, the other workers are showing similar signs of mental breakdown. Some are muttering to themselves, others are crying silently as they work. A few have developed the 1,000-yard stare of people who have been pushed beyond their limits. The field has become a collection of broken human beings, held together only by fear and the desperate need to survive. The sun is getting lower now, casting long shadows across the frozen ground. You know that sunset is still hours away, but it feels like an eternity. Each minute stretches like an hour, each hour like a day. Time has become your enemy, a slow torture that prolongs your suffering indefinitely. Your family seems like a distant memory now, even though you saw them just a few hours ago. The warm fire in your hovel, Margaret's worried face, your children's hungry eyes, they all feel like scenes from someone else's life. The only reality is the spade in your hands, the frozen earth beneath your feet, and the constant grinding pain that has become your entire world. The overseer continues his patrol, his presence a constant threat that keeps everyone working despite their condition. He shows no sign of fatigue or discomfort, protected as he is by warm clothes and the knowledge that his suffering will end when the workday does. For him, this is just a job. For you, it's a matter of life and death. As 5 o'clock approaches, you realize that you're not going to make it through the day. Your body has reached its absolute limit, and you can feel yourself beginning to shut down. Your vision is tunneling, your hearing is muffled, and your movements are becoming increasingly erratic. You're on the verge of collapse, and you know that when it comes, it will be final. But somehow you keep going. Some primitive survival instinct takes over, driving your body forward, even when your conscious mind has given up. The spade rises and falls, in a rhythm as automatic as breathing. You're no longer a human being. You're a machine, a tool for converting suffering into productivity. The ditch grows deeper, inch by agonizing inch. Your blood mixes with the frozen earth, creating a grotesque mortar that binds the soil together. Your sweat, despite the cold, drips steadily onto the ground, adding salt to the mixture. You're literally pouring your life into this ditch, sacrificing your body for the Lord's profit. This is medieval labor in all its brutal reality. No safety regulations, no workers' rights, no concept of human dignity. Just the raw exploitation of human beings by a system that sees them as nothing more than tools to be used up and discarded. And you still have an hour of daylight left. The sun continues its relentless march toward the horizon, each minute bringing you closer to the end of this ordeal. But you're not sure you'll survive to see it. Your body is failing, your spirit is broken, and your will to live is hanging by the thinnest of threads. Yet still you work, because in medieval times the alternative to working is dying. And dying means abandoning your family to the same fate that awaits Thomas's children. So you endure, you suffer, and you pray that somehow, some way you'll find the strength to make it through another day in this hell on earth. The church bell tolls vespers across the frozen fields, its bronze voice cutting through the gathering dusk like a promise of deliverance. 6 o'clock, the end of the official workday, though in medieval times the concept of quitting time is more theoretical than practical. Your body has been pushed so far beyond its limits that you're not sure you can stop working even if you're allowed to. You straighten your back for the first time in hours, and the movement sends such intense pain through your spine that you nearly black out. Your vertebrae feel like they've fused together, and you have to grip your spade to keep from falling over. Around you, your fellow workers are going through the same agonizing process of unbending their tortured bodies, their faces contorted with pain. The overseer calls out from his horse, his voice carrying easily across the field. "Tools away," he shouts. "But remember, you'll be back here at dawn, and I expect twice the work to make up for today's poor showing." His words hit you like physical blows. The idea of returning tomorrow, of going through this ordeal again, seems impossible. But you know you will, because the alternative is starvation for your family. This is the trap of medieval life. You're too exhausted to work, but too poor to stop. You lean your spade against the fence post where you found it this morning, though it feels like a lifetime ago. Your hands are so damaged that you can barely release your grip on the wooden handle. The palms are raw meat now, with strips of skin hanging loose and blood flowing freely. The animal fat salve Margaret applied has long since been worn away, leaving your wounds exposed to the cold air. The walk back to the village is a nightmare of pain and exhaustion. Your legs are shaking so badly that you can barely stand, let alone walk. Each step sends fresh waves of agony through your frozen feet, and you suspect that several toes are now completely frostbitten. The crude leather shoes you wear have provided no protection against the elements, and you can feel ice crystals crunching inside them with each step. Your fellow workers are in similar condition. Several have to be helped by their neighbors, their bodies too damaged to function independently. Others stumble along in a daze, their minds retreating from the overwhelming pain and exhaustion. The procession back to the village looks like a retreat from a battlefield, which in many ways it is. Thomas is nowhere to be seen. His broken body was dragged away hours ago, and no one knows if he's alive or dead. His absence is a stark reminder of what happens to workers who can't keep up with the brutal demands of medieval labor. You try not to think about his 3 young children, now orphans in a world that has no safety net for the vulnerable. The village comes into view as darkness begins to fall, its collection of hovels looking even more depressing in the fading light. Smoke rises from cooking fires, creating a gray haze that hangs over the settlement like a funeral shroud. The smell hits you before you reach the first houses, the same mixture of human waste, animal droppings, and unwashed bodies that defines medieval life. Your own hovel looks like a sanctuary after the day's ordeal, despite its obvious shortcomings. The walls may be stained with soot and the roof may leak, but it represents warmth and rest, and a few precious hours away from the overseer's whip. You push open the wooden door and stumble inside, your legs finally giving out as you cross the threshold. Margaret looks up from the fire as you enter, and her face goes white with shock at your condition. You must look like a walking corpse, covered in blood and dirt, shaking with exhaustion and cold, barely able to stand. She rushes to your side and helps you to the 3-legged stool by the hearth. "Sweet Mary," she whispers, her voice filled with horror. "What have they done to you?" You try to answer, but no words come. Your throat is raw from breathing cold air and dust, and your voice has been reduced to a hoarse croak. Instead, you simply collapse onto the stool and hold your damaged hands out to the fire, desperate for any warmth you can get. The heat from the flames is both blessing and curse. As circulation slowly returns to your frozen extremities, the pain becomes excruciating. Your hands and feet throb with a deep, burning ache that makes you want to scream. But you bite your tongue and endure it, knowing that the alternative, permanent damage from frostbite, would be even worse. Margaret brings you a clay cup filled with warm ale, and you drink it greedily despite the pain it causes your raw throat. The liquid is weak and sour, but it's warm, and that's all that matters. She also brings a bowl of water and begins to clean your wounds. her touch gentle but necessarily painful as she removes the dirt and debris that has accumulated in the cuts. Your children are huddled in the corner of the room, their eyes wide with fear as they take in your condition. Little Mary's cough has gotten worse throughout the day, and you can hear the wet, rattling sound that signals the onset of lung fever. In a few days, she'll either recover or die, and there's nothing you can do to influence the outcome. John, your 8-year-old son, looks like he's aged years since this morning. The sight of his father's suffering has stripped away what little innocence he had left, forcing him to confront the brutal realities of the world he's been born into. Agnes, your 12-year-old daughter, is trying to comfort her younger siblings while helping her mother tend to your wounds. The single room that serves as your entire world feels smaller than ever. The animals that share your living space, the pig, the chickens, the goat, seem to take up more room than they should, their presence a constant reminder of how little space you have for human comfort. The smell is overwhelming, a mixture of animal waste, human sweat, smoke, and the metallic scent of your blood. Margaret has prepared what passes for supper in your household. More pottage, this time made with the last of your winter vegetables and a small piece of salted pork that she's been saving for a special occasion. The fact that she's using it now tells you how worried she is about your condition. In medieval times, wives don't waste precious food unless they think their husband might not survive the night. The pottage is slightly better than what you had at midday. The vegetables are less withered. The pork provides actual flavor instead of just salt. But your stomach, shrunken from chronic hunger and traumatized by the day's ordeal, can barely handle the food. You manage a few spoonfuls before nausea overwhelms you, and you have to stop eating to avoid vomiting up what little nutrition you've managed to consume. Margaret watches you with growing concern. She's seen men come home from the fields broken before, but never quite like this. Your hands are destroyed, your feet may be permanently damaged by frostbite, and your back is so injured that you can barely move. She knows that if you can't work tomorrow, the family will have no income, no food, no hope of survival. "Can you move your fingers?" she asks quietly, examining your damaged hands by the flickering firelight. You try to flex them, but the pain is so intense that you nearly pass out. Several fingers don't respond at all. The tendons may be severed, or the damage from cold and trauma may be too severe for normal function. These hands, which have been your tools for survival, may never work properly again. The implications are terrifying. In medieval times, a man who can't work with his hands is essentially useless. There's no disability support, no alternative employment, no safety net of any kind. If your hands don't heal properly, your family will starve. It's that simple and that brutal. Margaret begins applying a poultice made from herbs and animal fat to your wounds. The mixture stings terribly, but she knows it's the only chance you have of preventing infection. In a world without antibiotics, even minor cuts can become life-threatening if they become infected. Your hands, with their deep lacerations and exposure to dirt and filth, are prime candidates for sepsis. As she works, she tells you about her day, a litany of small struggles and minor victories that make up the life of a medieval woman. She spent the morning spinning thread from the small amount of wool your family managed to acquire, work that requires steady hands and good eyesight. The thread she produces will be woven into cloth that can be sold or traded for other necessities. In the afternoon, she tended the small garden plot behind your hovel, trying to coax life from the frozen ground. The vegetables she grows, turnips, onions, cabbages, provide essential nutrition for your family, but the yield is always uncertain. A late frost, too much rain, or an invasion of pests can destroy an entire season's work in a matter of days. She also spent time caring for the animals that share your living space. The pig needs to be fed and watered, the chickens require attention, and the goat must be milked. These animals are more than just livestock. They're your insurance policy against starvation. The pig will eventually be slaughtered and salted for winter meat. The chickens provide eggs and occasional meat. The goat gives milk that can be drunk fresh or made into cheese. But maintaining these animals is a constant struggle. Feed is expensive and often scarce. Disease can wipe out your entire investment in a matter of days. Theft is a constant threat. Hungry neighbors have been known to steal animals in the dead of night, and there's little you can do to stop them. Margaret also tells you about the village gossip she heard while drawing water from the well. Thomas, your neighbor who was beaten by the overseer, is still alive but barely. His injuries are severe, and the village wise woman doesn't think he'll survive the night. His 3 children are already begging for food from the other families, but everyone is struggling to feed their own. There's also news of the Lord's latest demands. He's planning to increase the corvée labor requirement from 3 days a week to 4, claiming that his fields need more attention. This means less time for you to work your own plot, less opportunity to grow food for your family, less chance of survival. But there's nothing you can do about it. The Lord's word is law, and peasants who object to his demands quickly find themselves homeless or worse. The church is also demanding higher tithes this year. The priest claims that the bishop needs more money for repairs to the cathedral, but everyone knows that most of the money will end up in the pockets of corrupt officials. Still, refusing to pay tithes is considered a sin, and excommunication means social death in a medieval village. As Margaret talks, you become aware of the sounds around you. Your children are coughing. All of them have the persistent hack that comes from breathing smoke and cold air. The animals are stirring restlessly, sensing the tension in the room. Outside, you can hear the sounds of the village settling in for the night. Doors closing, fires being banked, the occasional cry of a baby or the bark of a dog. The fire in the center of the room is beginning to die down, and Margaret adds another precious piece of wood to keep it burning. Fuel is expensive and hard to come by, but she knows that letting the fire die would be a death sentence for the family. The temperature inside the hovel is barely above freezing, and without the fire's warmth, you would all freeze to death before morning. As the evening progresses, your condition continues to deteriorate. The adrenaline that kept you going through the day's ordeal is wearing off, and your body is beginning to shut down. Your breathing is becoming labored and shallow. Your heart rate is irregular, and you're having trouble staying conscious. Margaret recognizes the signs. She's seen men die from exhaustion and exposure before. She knows that the next few hours will determine whether you survive the night or join the countless peasants who have been worked to death in the service of their lords. She sends Agnes to fetch the village wise woman, an elderly crone named Godiva, who serves as the closest thing to a doctor that the village has. Godiva arrives within the hour, her bent figure wrapped in a tattered cloak, carrying a leather bag filled with herbs and folk remedies. The wise woman examines you by the flickering firelight, her gnarled hands surprisingly gentle as she probes your injuries. She shakes her head grimly as she takes in the extent of the damage, the destroyed hands, the frost-bitten feet, the signs of internal injury from the day's brutal labor. "He's in a bad way," she tells Margaret quietly. "I've seen strong men die from less. His hands may never work properly again. And those feet." She trails off, but the implication is clear. Amputation may be necessary to prevent gangrene from spreading. She prepares a mixture of herbs, willow bark for pain, comfrey for healing, and other plants whose names and properties have been passed down through generations of village healers. The concoction is bitter and foul-tasting, but you drink it gratefully, hoping for any relief from the constant pain. Godiva also applies fresh poultices to your wounds, using a mixture of honey, herbs, and clean cloth. Honey is expensive, but it has natural antibacterial properties that may help prevent infection. The poultices are wrapped tightly to keep them in place and to provide some protection for your damaged hands. "Keep him warm," she instructs Margaret, "and pray. That's all we can do now." The wise woman's words hang in the air like a death sentence. In medieval times, there's little that can be done for severe injuries beyond basic wound care and prayer. You're entirely dependent on your body's ability to heal itself, and given the extent of your injuries and your poor overall health, the odds are not in your favor. As the night deepens, your family settles in for what may be your last night together. Margaret lies down beside you on the straw mattress, her body providing what little warmth she can. Your children huddle together nearby, their eyes wide with fear as they listen to your labored breathing. The animals in the room seem to sense the gravity of the situation. The pig lies quietly in its corner. The chickens roost silently in the rafters, and even the goat seems subdued. The only sounds are the crackling of the fire, the whistle of wind through the gaps in the walls, and your increasingly irregular breathing. You drift in and out of consciousness, your mind wandering between the present moment and fevered dreams of the day's ordeal. You relive the morning's brutal labor, feel again the shock of the hoe against frozen earth, experience once more the agony of your hands being torn apart by the rough wooden handle. In your delirium, you see Thomas lying broken in the field, his blood staining the frozen ground. You see the overseer's whip rising and falling, hear the crack of leather against flesh, feel the fear that kept you working despite your body's protests. You see your children's hungry faces, Margaret's worried eyes, the endless cycle of poverty and suffering that defines your existence. But you also see moments of beauty, the sunrise over the fields, the warmth of your family gathered around the fire, the simple pleasure of a warm meal after a day of hard work. These small joys are what make life bearable, what give meaning to the struggle for survival. As the night wears on, your breathing becomes more labored, and your periods of consciousness become shorter. Margaret holds your hand gently, careful not to disturb the bandages, and whispers prayers for your recovery. Your children take turns sitting beside you, their small hands touching your forehead, their voices joining their mothers in desperate pleas to God for mercy. The fire burns lower, casting dancing shadows on the soot-stained walls. The temperature in the room drops steadily, and you can see your breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Margaret adds another piece of wood to the fire, knowing that she's using up precious fuel, but unable to let you freeze to death. Outside, the village is settling into the deep quiet of a winter night. Most families are huddled around their own fires, struggling with their own problems, fighting their own battles for survival. There's no community support system, no social services, no help available for families in crisis. Everyone is too busy trying to survive to worry about their neighbors. The church bell tolls the hours, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, each chime a reminder of time passing, of another hour survived in this harsh world. But for you, time has become meaningless. Past, present, and future blur together in a haze of pain and exhaustion. Your body is shutting down system by system. Your kidneys are failing from dehydration and trauma. Your heart is struggling to pump blood through your damaged circulatory system. Your lungs are filling with fluid, making each breath a monumental effort. You're dying slowly, your life ebbing away like water from a cracked pot. But still you fight, driven by the knowledge that your family needs you, that your death would condemn them to the same fate that awaits Thomas's children. You cling to consciousness with desperate determination, refusing to give in to the darkness that threatens to overwhelm you. Margaret continues her vigil, bathing your forehead with cool water, adjusting your position to ease your breathing, whispering words of comfort and encouragement. She knows that she may be watching her husband die, but she refuses to give up hope. In medieval times, hope is often all that stands between life and death. As 10 o'clock approaches, you realize that you've survived another day in this brutal world. It may be your last, but you've endured the unendurable, suffered the insufferable, and somehow found the strength to keep going when everything in your body screamed for you to stop. This is medieval life in all its harsh reality, not the romanticized vision of noble knights and fair maidens, but the grinding daily struggle of ordinary people trying to survive in a world that seems designed to crush the human spirit. And somehow, against all odds, you're still breathing. The night is far from over, and the challenges ahead may be even greater than those you've already faced. But for now, in this moment, surrounded by your family and warmed by the flickering fire, you're alive. And in medieval times, that's victory enough. The church bell tolls 10 o'clock, its bronze voice echoing across the sleeping village like a funeral knell. In medieval times, this is deep night, a time when honest folk should be asleep, gathering strength for another day of brutal labor. But sleep is a luxury you can't afford tonight. Your body is failing, your breathing is becoming more labored with each passing hour, and your family keeps vigil around your straw mattress like mourners at a wake. The fire in the center of the room has burned down to glowing embers, casting dancing shadows on the soot-stained walls. Margaret adds another precious piece of wood, knowing that she's depleting your winter fuel supply but unable to let you freeze to death. The flames flicker to life again, providing a small circle of warmth in the frigid hovel. Your condition has worsened significantly since the wise woman's visit. The poultices on your hands are soaked with blood and pus, indicating that infection is setting in despite Godiva's best efforts. Your feet have swollen to twice their normal size, and the skin has turned a mottled black and blue that signals severe frostbite. The smell of gangrene is beginning to permeate the room, a sweet, sickly odor that makes your family gag. Margaret sits beside you on the straw mattress, her hand resting gently on your forehead. Your skin is burning with fever now, your body's desperate attempt to fight off the infections that are spreading through your system. She dips a cloth in a bowl of precious water and bathes your face, trying to bring down your temperature and provide some small comfort. Your children are huddled together in the corner of the room, their eyes wide with terror as they watch their father dying by inches. Little Mary's cough has gotten worse throughout the evening, and you can hear the wet, rattling sound that signals the onset of lung fever. She may not survive the week, but right now, all attention is focused on your more immediate crisis. John, your 8-year-old son, keeps asking when you're going to get better, when you're going to go back to work, when things will return to normal. Margaret tries to comfort him with lies about your recovery, but the boy is old enough to understand that something terrible is happening. His childhood is ending tonight, replaced by the harsh knowledge that life is fragile and death is always near. Agnes, your 12-year-old daughter, has taken on the role of assistant nurse, helping her mother tend to your wounds and care for the younger children. She's already more adult than child, forced by circumstances to grow up far too quickly. In a few years, she'll be married off to some peasant boy, and the cycle of suffering will begin again. The animals that share your living space seem to sense the gravity of the situation. The pig lies quietly in its corner, occasionally grunting softly. The chickens roost silently in the rafters, their usual nighttime chatter subdued. Even the goat, normally restless and vocal, stands motionless in the shadows. As the night deepens, your breathing becomes increasingly labored. Each inhalation is a struggle, each exhalation a small victory. Your lungs are filling with fluid, a combination of blood from internal injuries and the body's inflammatory response to trauma. You're literally drowning in your own bodily fluids, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. The pain is beyond description. Your hands feel like they're on fire, the nerve endings screaming in agony as infection spreads through the damaged tissue. Your back is locked in a spasm of pain so intense that you can't move without crying out. Your feet are numb now, which is almost worse than the pain because it means the tissue is dying. But the physical pain is nothing compared to the mental anguish of knowing what your death will mean for your family. Without your labor, they have no income, no way to pay the Lord's taxes, no means of survival. Margaret might be able to remarry eventually, but she's no longer young, and she comes with 3 children who need feeding. The prospects are grim. Your mind wanders back over your life, such as it was. Born into poverty, raised in squalor, married young to a girl you barely knew, worked like an animal for masters who saw you as less than human. You've never traveled more than a few miles from the village where you were born. You've never owned anything of value, never experienced luxury or comfort, never had a moment of true freedom. Yet there have been small joys along the way. The birth of your children, despite the knowledge that they would face the same hardships you've endured. The warmth of your family gathered around the fire on winter evenings. The satisfaction of a good harvest, even though most of it would go to your Lord. The simple pleasure of Margaret's smile when you brought home an extra bit of food or a small gift. These memories seem precious now, golden moments in a life of grinding hardship. They're what make the struggle worthwhile, what give meaning to an existence that might otherwise seem pointless. Love, it turns out, can flourish even in the harshest conditions, even among people who have nothing but each other. Around midnight you experience a brief period of clarity. The fever breaks temporarily, and your mind clears enough to speak coherently for the first time since returning from the fields. Margaret leans close to hear your whispered words. "The children," you rasp, your voice barely audible. "Promise me you'll find a way to keep them alive." Margaret's eyes fill with tears, but she nods firmly. "I promise," she whispers back. "I'll find a way. I'll do whatever it takes." You try to say more, to give her advice about how to survive without you, but the effort exhausts you and you sink back into delirium. Your breathing becomes even more labored, and Margaret knows that time is running out. She sends Agnes to wake the priest. If you're going to die, you need last rites to ensure your soul's passage to heaven. Father Benedict arrives within the hour, his rotund figure wrapped in a thick woolen cloak that speaks of the church's wealth compared to your family's poverty. He's been roused from a warm bed in the stone rectory, and his irritation at being disturbed is barely concealed beneath his professional demeanor. The priest performs the sacrament of extreme unction with practiced efficiency, anointing your forehead with holy oil while muttering Latin prayers that you don't understand. The ritual is supposed to provide comfort and spiritual preparation for death, but it feels more like a bureaucratic formality, a box to be checked before your soul can be processed by the heavenly administration. "Has he made his confession?" Father Benedict asks Margaret, as if you're not lying right there listening. "He's been too ill to speak coherently," she replies. The priest frowns. "Then I cannot guarantee his salvation. The church requires proper confession before death, or the soul may be condemned to purgatory, or worse." His words hit Margaret like physical blows. The thought that your soul might be damned because you were too injured to confess your sins is almost unbearable. She begs the priest to hear whatever confession you might be able to make, even in your weakened state. Father Benedict sighs dramatically, as if this is a great inconvenience. He leans close to your ear and speaks loudly, as if you're deaf rather than dying. "My son, do you repent of your sins? Do you ask God's forgiveness for your transgressions?" You manage a weak nod, though you're not sure what sins you're supposed to have committed. Being born poor, working yourself to death for your Lord's profit, loving your family more than God. In medieval theology, even the most innocent actions can be construed as sinful if they don't serve the church's interests. The priest seems satisfied with your minimal response and completes the ritual. He then turns to Margaret with a calculating look in his eyes. "Of course, the church will need to be compensated for this late-night service, and there will be fees for the funeral mass, the burial plot, the prayers for his soul. Even in your dying moments, the church is extracting its pound of flesh from your family." Margaret nods numbly, knowing that she'll have to find money she doesn't have to pay for services that should be freely given. The church preaches about charity and compassion, but it practices neither when it comes to the poor. After the priest leaves, your family settles back into their vigil. The night seems endless, each hour stretching like a century. Your breathing becomes increasingly irregular, long periods of silence followed by sudden gasping inhalations. This is Cheney-Stokes breathing, a sign that your body is shutting down system by system. Margaret holds your hand gently, careful not to disturb the infected wounds. She tells you stories about your children, about the life she hopes they'll have, about the dreams she once harbored for your family. Her voice is soft and soothing, a lifeline connecting you to the world of the living, even as you drift toward the realm of the dead. Around 2 a.m, you experience what medieval people called the rally, a brief period when dying patients seem to recover, their symptoms improve, and they appear to be getting better. Your breathing eases, your fever breaks, and you're able to speak more clearly. "Margaret," you whisper, your voice stronger than it's been all night. "I can see them. My parents. They're waiting for me." She squeezes your hand gently. "Not yet," she pleads. "Stay with us a little longer." But you're already drifting away, your consciousness floating between the physical world and whatever lies beyond. The pain is receding now, replaced by a strange sense of peace. The struggles of your earthly life, the hunger, the cold, the backbreaking labor, seem distant and unimportant. You think about the fields where you've spent so many hours of your life, the frozen earth that has claimed so much of your blood and sweat. In your fevered imagination, you see them in spring, green and fertile, new crops pushing up through the soil that you helped prepare. Your suffering wasn't meaningless. It was part of the eternal cycle of death and renewal that keeps the world turning. The rally doesn't last long. By 3 o'clock, you're sinking back into unconsciousness, your body's systems failing one by one. Your kidneys have stopped functioning. Your heart is beating irregularly, and your lungs are filling with fluid. Death is no longer a possibility. It's an inevitability, and probably a mercy. Margaret continues her vigil, bathing your forehead, adjusting your position, whispering words of love and comfort. Your children take turns sitting beside you, their small hands touching your arm, their voices joining their mothers in desperate prayers for a miracle that won't come. The fire burns lower, and Margaret adds another piece of wood, knowing that she's using up fuel that the family will need to survive the winter. But she can't let you die in the cold and dark. Even in death, you deserve what little comfort she can provide. Outside, the village is deep in sleep. Most families are huddled around their own fires, unaware of the drama playing out in your hovel. There's no community support system, no neighbors coming to help, no social services to assist a family in crisis. Everyone is too busy fighting their own battles for survival to worry about anyone else. The church bell tolls 3 o'clock, then 4. Each chime seems to echo in your failing consciousness, marking the passage of time toward an inevitable conclusion. Your breathing becomes shallower and more irregular, with longer pauses between each breath. Margaret knows the end is near. She's seen death before. In childbirth, from disease, from accidents and violence. She recognizes the signs, the gray pallor of your skin, the way your eyes have sunk back into your skull, the rattling sound in your chest as your lungs fill with fluid. She gathers your children around the mattress, wanting them to be present for your final moments. It's important in medieval culture for families to witness death, to see the soul's departure from the body, to begin the grieving process that will help them accept their loss. Say goodbye to your father, she tells them softly. Tell him you love him. Little Mary, despite her own illness, crawls close to your side. Papa, she whispers, her voice barely audible. I love you. Please don't leave us. John takes your hand in his small fingers, careful not to hurt your wounds. I'll take care of Mama and the girls, he promises, though he's only 8 years old and has no idea how he'll keep such a vow. Agnes, mature beyond her years, simply kisses your forehead and whispers, Thank you for everything, Papa. We'll remember you. Their words reach you through the fog of approaching death, and you try to respond, to give them some final blessing or piece of wisdom. But your voice is gone now, your strength completely spent. All you can do is squeeze their hands weakly and hope they understand how much you love them. As 4 o'clock approaches, your breathing becomes even more labored. Each breath is a monumental effort, your body fighting desperately to cling to life even as your organs shut down one by one. Margaret holds you close, her tears falling on your face as she whispers final words of love. You've been a good husband, she tells you, a good father. You've done everything you could for us. Now rest. Let go. We'll be all right. But you both know that's not true. Without your labor, the family has no income, no way to survive. Margaret might find work as a servant or a wet nurse, but the pay would be minimal and the conditions harsh. The children will likely end up as beggars or, if they're lucky, as servants in some lord's household. This is the brutal reality of medieval life. Death doesn't just claim individuals, it destroys entire families. There's no life insurance, no social safety net, no government assistance. When the breadwinner dies, the family faces starvation, homelessness, and often death. Your breathing becomes increasingly erratic now, with long pauses between each inhalation. Your heart is struggling to pump blood through your damaged circulatory system, and your brain is being deprived of oxygen. You're entering the final stages of death, and there's no turning back. Margaret continues to hold you, her body providing what little warmth and comfort she can. Your children huddle close, their eyes wide with fear and grief as they watch their father slip away. The animals in the room seem to sense what's happening. They're unusually quiet, as if paying their respects to a fellow creature's passing. The fire burns lower, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The temperature in the room drops steadily, and everyone's breath forms clouds in the frigid air. But Margaret doesn't add more wood. She needs to conserve fuel for the long, cold nights ahead when she'll be alone with 3 children and no income. As the night wears on toward dawn, you drift in and out of consciousness, your mind wandering between the present moment and memories of your life. You see yourself as a young man, strong and hopeful despite the hardships you faced. You remember your wedding day, the joy of holding your newborn children, the simple pleasures of family life around the fire. But mostly, you think about the work, the endless, back-breaking labor that has defined your existence. The fields you've plowed, the crops you've planted and harvested, the ditches you've dug, the tools you've wielded until your hands bled. It seems like such a small legacy for a human life, but it's what you have to offer. Your breathing becomes shallower and more irregular with longer pauses between each breath. Your family knows the end is near and they gather closer, their hands touching your body, their voices whispering final words of love and farewell. The church bell tolls 4 o'clock, its bronze voice cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. In a few hours, the village will wake to another day of struggle and hardship. The fields will need tending, the animals will need care, and life will go on without you. But for now, in this moment, you're still here, still breathing, still clinging to life with desperate determination. Your body may be failing, but your spirit remains strong, sustained by love for your family and the knowledge that you've done everything you could to provide for them. This is medieval death in all its harsh reality, not the romanticized passing of knights and nobles, but the slow, painful end of a man worn out by a lifetime of brutal labor. No glory, no honor, just the quiet courage of someone who fought every day to survive in a world that seemed designed to crush the human spirit. The night is almost over, but your struggle continues. Each breath is a victory, each heartbeat a small triumph over the forces that seek to claim you. And somewhere in the darkness, dawn is approaching, bringing with it the promise of another day, a day you may not live to see, but one that your family will face with whatever strength and courage you've managed to give them. The church bell tolls 4 o'clock, its bronze voice cutting through the pre-dawn darkness like a blade of inevitability. In the medieval world, this is the hour of lauds, when monks in their warm monasteries rise to sing praises to God. But in your hovel, there are no songs of praise, only the labored breathing of a dying man and the quiet sobs of a family watching their world collapse. Your breathing has become so irregular that Margaret holds her own breath between your inhalations, waiting to see if each one will be your last. The pauses grow longer, 10 seconds, 15, 20, before your chest suddenly heaves with a desperate gasp for air. This is the death rattle, the sound of a body fighting its final battle against the inevitable. The infection in your hands has spread up your arms, creating angry red streaks that mark the path of poison through your bloodstream. Your feet have turned completely black now, the flesh dead and beginning to rot. The smell of gangrene fills the small room, a sweet, sickly odor that makes your family gag even as they refuse to leave your side. Margaret has stopped trying to give you water or medicine. Your throat has closed up, and any liquid would only cause you to choke. Instead, she simply holds your hand, the one that's least damaged, and whispers words of comfort that you may or may not be able to hear. Your children are exhausted from their all-night vigil, but they refuse to sleep. Little Mary, despite her own worsening cough, curls up beside you on the straw mattress, her small body providing what little warmth she can. John sits cross-legged nearby, his 8-year-old mind struggling to comprehend what's happening to his father. Agnes, mature beyond her 12 years, helps her mother tend to your needs while trying to comfort her younger siblings. The fire has burned down to barely glowing embers, and the temperature in the room has dropped to just above freezing. Margaret knows she should add more wood, but fuel is precious, and she needs to conserve what little they have for the long winter ahead. Without your income, every resource becomes critical to the family's survival. Around 4:30, you experience another brief moment of clarity. Your eyes open and focus on Margaret's face, and for a moment, the fog of approaching death lifts enough for you to speak. The Lord's taxes, you whisper, your voice barely audible. Due, at Michaelmas, the silver, hidden, under the hearthstone. Margaret nods, tears streaming down her face. You've managed to save a few precious coins over the years, hiding them from the tax collectors and the Lord's agents. It's not much, perhaps enough to pay the taxes for one season, but it might buy your family a little time to figure out how to survive without you. I know, she whispers back. I'll find it. Don't worry about us. Just rest. But you can't rest, not yet. There's too much left unsaid, too many instructions to give, too many fears about what will happen to your family after you're gone. You try to speak again, but the effort exhausts you, and you sink back into unconsciousness. The village is beginning to stir around you. Through the thin walls of your hovel, you can hear the sounds of other families starting their day, doors creaking open, animals being let out, the distant sound of someone chopping wood. Life goes on, indifferent to your suffering, unconcerned with your family's tragedy. Your neighbor's rooster crows, announcing the approach of dawn. In a few hours, the overseer will be calling for workers to return to the fields. But you won't be among them. Your place in the line of bent, exhausted peasants will be empty, and no one will mourn your absence except your family. The feudal system that has governed your life doesn't pause for individual tragedies. The Lord's fields still need tending. His taxes still need collecting. His profits still need maximizing. You were just one cog in a vast machine of exploitation, and when one cog breaks, it's simply replaced with another. Margaret knows this. She knows that within days, the Lord's agents will come looking for you, demanding to know why you're not working, insisting that your family's obligations continue regardless of your condition. She'll have to find a way to pay the taxes, to meet the corvée labor requirements, to keep the family fed and housed. The options are limited and grim. She might be able to find work as a servant in the Lord's manor, but that would mean leaving the children alone for long hours. She could try to remarry, but she's no longer young and she comes with 3 mouths to feed, not an attractive proposition for most men. She might be forced to sell herself into bondage, becoming a serf bound to the land in exchange for protection and a small plot to work. Or she might simply fail, and the family could end up as beggars, wandering from village to village, sleeping in ditches, eating scraps, slowly starving to death. It's a fate that befalls many medieval families when the breadwinner dies or becomes unable to work. As 5 o'clock approaches, your breathing becomes even more labored. Your lungs are filling with fluid, and each breath sounds like you're drowning. Your heart is struggling to pump blood through your damaged circulatory system, and your pulse is weak and irregular. Margaret can see that the end is near. She gathers your children closer, wanting them to be present for your final moments. In medieval culture, it's important for families to witness death, to see the soul's departure from the body, to begin the grieving process that will help them accept their loss. Say your final goodbyes, she tells them softly. Papa is going to be with God soon. The children don't fully understand what's happening, but they sense the gravity of the moment. They take turns whispering words of love and farewell, their small voices barely audible above the sound of your labored breathing. Little Mary, despite her own illness, manages to crawl closer to your face. Papa, she whispers, her breath warm against your cheek. Will you watch over us from heaven? Will you make sure the angels keep us safe? Your eyes flutter open at the sound of her voice, and for a moment you seem to see her clearly. You try to nod, to give her some sign that you've heard her plea, but your body no longer obeys your will. Instead, a single tear rolls down your cheek, whether from pain, love, or the knowledge of what your death will mean for your children. No one can say. John, your son, takes your hand in his small fingers. "I'll be the man of the house now, Papa," he says with the solemn determination of a child trying to be brave. "I'll take care of Mama and my sisters. I promise." The weight of that promise hangs heavy in the air. An 8-year-old boy cannot replace a grown man's labor, cannot earn enough to support a family, cannot protect them from the harsh realities of medieval life, but his willingness to try, his innocent courage in the face of impossible odds, speaks to the resilience of the human spirit even in the darkest circumstances. Agnes, your eldest, simply kisses your forehead and whispers, "I love you, Papa. Thank you for working so hard for us. Thank you for never giving up." Her words cut through the fog of approaching death, and you feel a surge of emotion so powerful it almost brings you back to full consciousness. This is what it was all for. The backbreaking labor, the constant hunger, the daily struggle against impossible odds. Not for glory or wealth or recognition, but for love. For the chance to give your children life, even if that life would be as hard as your own. The church bell tolls 5 o'clock, and with it comes the first faint light of dawn creeping through the gaps in your walls. The long night is finally ending, but you won't live to see the sunrise. Your breathing has become so shallow that Margaret has to lean close to your chest to detect any movement at all. Your pulse is barely perceptible now, a faint flutter beneath your skin that grows weaker with each passing moment. Your body temperature is dropping as your circulation fails, and your skin has taken on the waxy gray pallor that marks the approach of death. Margaret knows there's nothing more she can do. She's exhausted her limited knowledge of healing, used up precious resources on medicines and treatments that have proven ineffective. Now all she can do is hold you close and wait for the inevitable end. The animals in the room seem to sense what's happening. The pig lies quietly in its corner, occasionally grunting softly. The chickens have stopped their usual morning chatter, roosting silently in the rafters. Even the goat stands motionless, as if paying its respects to a fellow creature's passing. Outside, the village is fully awake now. You can hear the sounds of daily life beginning. People calling to each other, animals being driven to pasture, the clatter of wooden wheels on frozen ground. The world is moving on without you, indifferent to your suffering, unconcerned with your family's loss. The overseer will be making his rounds soon, checking to see which workers are fit for duty and which need to be replaced. When he discovers your absence, he'll mark you down as deceased in his ledger and make a note to find a replacement. Your life's work, your decades of service, your sacrifice of health and happiness for your Lord's profit, all of it will be reduced to a single line in an account book. But in this room, in this moment, you are more than just a line in a ledger. You are a husband, a father, a man who fought every day to provide for his family, despite impossible odds. You are someone who loved and was loved in return, who found meaning and purpose in the simple act of caring for others.
Around 6:30, you experience what medieval people called the final rally, a last surge of energy that sometimes occurs just before death. Your eyes open wide, your breathing becomes stronger for a few moments, and you seem to see something that others cannot. The light, you whisper, your voice clearer than it's been all night. So bright, so warm. Margaret leans close, hoping for some final words, some last message of love or comfort. But you're already drifting away, your consciousness floating between the physical world and whatever lies beyond. Your eyes remain open, but they're focused on something far beyond the confines of your humble hovel. The rally lasts only a few minutes before you sink back into unconsciousness. But those few moments give your family hope that perhaps you're not in pain, that perhaps death will be a release rather than a torment. In medieval theology, visions of light at the moment of death are considered signs of divine grace, indications that the soul is being welcomed into heaven. The church bell tolls 7 o'clock, and the sound seems to echo in your failing consciousness. You've survived the night, but dawn brings no relief, no miraculous recovery. If anything, The growing light only makes your condition more apparent. The grey pallor of your skin, the sunken appearance of your eyes, the way your chest barely rises and falls with each laboured breath. Margaret has stopped trying to give you water or adjust your position. She simply holds your hand and whispers words of love, knowing that these may be the last sounds you hear in this world. Your children remain close, their small hands touching your arms and face, their presence a final gift of warmth and comfort. The village is fully active now. Through the thin walls, you can hear the sounds of people preparing for another day of labour, the scrape of tools being sharpened, the creak of cartwheels, the lowing of cattle being driven to pasture. Life continues its relentless march, indifferent to individual suffering, unconcerned with personal tragedy. Your breathing becomes even more irregular, with longer and longer pauses between each inhalation. Your heart is struggling to maintain circulation, and your pulse is so weak that Margaret can barely detect it. Your body temperature continues to drop as your systems shut down one by one. Around 7:30, you take what will be your final conscious breath. Your eyes flutter open one last time, and you seem to see your family clearly. Margaret's tear-stained face, your children's frightened eyes, the humble room that has been your entire world. You try to speak, to give them some final blessing or word of comfort, but no sound comes. Instead, you simply look at each of them in turn, your eyes conveying all the love and gratitude that words cannot express. You've given them everything you had, your strength, your health, your life itself. It wasn't much by the standards of the wealthy, but it was everything you possessed. Your eyes close for the final time, and your breathing becomes so shallow that it's barely perceptible. Your family leans close, holding their own breath as they wait for yours. The room falls silent, except for the faint whistle of wind through the gaps in the walls and the distant sounds of the village going about its daily business. The church bell tolls 8 o'clock, marking the canonical hour of prime and the official beginning of the working day. In the fields where you've spent so many hours of your life, other peasants are taking up their tools and beginning another day of back-breaking labour. The overseer is making his rounds, counting heads and assigning tasks, but you won't be among them. Your place in the line of bent, exhausted workers will remain empty, a silent testimony to the human cost of medieval agriculture. Your tools will be given to someone else, your obligations transferred to your family, your name forgotten by all but those who loved you. As the morning light grows stronger, filtering through the gaps in your walls and casting long shadows across the earthen floor, your breathing becomes so faint that it's almost imperceptible. Your pulse flutters weakly, then grows still. Your body, worn out by a lifetime of brutal labour and finally broken by a single day of impossible demands, gives up its struggle. Margaret feels the moment when your spirit departs. Your hand, which she's been holding throughout the long night, grows cold and still. Your chest, which has been rising and falling with such difficulty, becomes motionless. The man she married, the father of her children, the partner in her struggle for survival, is gone. She doesn't cry out or wail with grief. Such displays are luxuries that medieval peasants can't afford. Instead, she simply closes your eyes, folds your hands across your chest, and begins the practical preparations for death that are as much a part of medieval life as birth or marriage. Your children gather around the straw mattress, their young minds struggling to comprehend the finality of what has happened. They've seen death before. It's a constant presence in medieval life. But this is different. This is their father, their protector, their provider. Without you, their world has become a much more dangerous and uncertain place. The sun rises over the village, casting its pale light through the gaps in your walls and illuminating the scene of your family's loss. Outside, the world continues its relentless march, people working, animals grazing, life going on, as if nothing has changed. But inside your humble hovel, everything has changed. A man has died, a family has been shattered, and the brutal cycle of medieval life has claimed another victim. This is how most people died in medieval times, not in glorious battle or peaceful old age, but worn out by labor, broken by a system that valued them only for their productivity, forgotten by history, except as statistics in the great ledger of human suffering. Your death is neither unique nor remarkable by medieval standards. It's simply the inevitable end of a life lived on the margins of survival. But to your family, you were everything. You were the man who worked himself to death to keep them fed, who endured unimaginable hardships to provide them with shelter, who sacrificed his health and happiness for their survival. Your death leaves a void that can never be filled, a loss that will echo through their lives for years to come. The church bell tolls again, marking another hour in the endless cycle of medieval time. Your body lies still on the straw mattress, finally at peace after a lifetime of struggle. Your family begins the long process of grieving, of learning to survive without you, of facing an uncertain future with whatever strength and courage you've managed to give them. This is medieval death in all its harsh reality, not the romanticized passing of knights and nobles, but the quiet end of an ordinary man who fought every day to survive in a world that seemed designed to crush the human spirit. No glory, no honor, just the simple courage of someone who never gave up, even when giving up would have been easier. Your 24 hours in medieval times are over. You didn't survive them. Few people could have. But in your struggle, in your suffering, and in your love for your family, you embodied the resilience of the human spirit in the face of impossible odds. And perhaps, in the end, that's the most any of us can hope for. And there we have it, 24 hours in medieval times that would absolutely destroy any modern person. From the moment you wake up in a flea-infested hovel to your final breath on a straw mattress, every single hour brings new horrors, new challenges, and new reminders of just how brutal life really was for ordinary people in the Middle Ages. We've journeyed through the crushing weight of feudal labor, the constant threat of starvation, the complete absence of medical care, and the grinding poverty that defined existence for 90% of the population. We've seen how a single day of backbreaking work could literally kill a person, how families lived in conditions that would be considered inhumane by any modern standard, and how death was always just one accident, one illness, one harsh winter away. This wasn't the romanticized medieval world of Hollywood movies or fantasy novels. This was reality, harsh, unforgiving, and utterly indifferent to human suffering. The knights in shining armor, the grand feasts, the chivalrous quests, those were the experiences of perhaps 1% of the population. For everyone else, life was a daily struggle against hunger, cold, disease, and exploitation. But perhaps most remarkably, people endured. They found ways to survive, to love, to create meaning in the midst of unimaginable hardship. They built families, communities, and cultures that would eventually evolve into the world we know today. Their suffering wasn't meaningless. It was the foundation upon which our modern civilization was built. So the next time you flip a light switch, turn on a faucet, or grab something from your refrigerator, remember the medieval peasant who died in this story. Remember the countless millions who lived and died in similar circumstances, whose struggles and sacrifices made our comfortable modern lives possible. Their stories deserve to be told, their suffering acknowledged, and their resilience celebrated. Because in the end, they were us, human beings trying to make the best of impossible circumstances, finding love and meaning in the darkest of times, and never giving up hope that tomorrow might be just a little bit better than today. Thanks for joining me on this journey through one of history's darkest chapters. If you enjoyed this deep dive into medieval life, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Until next time, sleep well and be grateful for the world we live in today.